Hello.
Yeah, it's okay now. Great.
Oh, it's okay. Okay. Because I am in the room with Hiroko. So
Swati, I just sent you one message. Would you please check?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Professor Farad.
Okay, good morning, Didi Kim. Good morning, Din Sonobe. And have we broadcast this, Swati?
Host will have to do that. I leave it to Hiroko.
Hiroko now broadcast. Have you broadcast? Okay. Yeah, we wait a little bit and then.
You look good. Hi, Wawan.
Good morning, everyone. Didi Kim.
Long time.
Professor Chris, how are you? Didi Kim.
Hi, Wawan.
Nice to meet you.
And do you know Din Sonobe yet? You know Din Sonobe, this is Wawan. He held my position, my predecessor.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Finally,
nice to here. So today, when I asked his PPT and he's so confident, said send to Hiroko, and Hiroko never received that. Actually, he sent to another Hiroko. So he just know everyone in the office.
I'm sorry, yeah.
We have another Hiroko Asizume now.
Yeah, we have new Hiroko. So when Wawan was there was a Hiroko, but this is new Hiroko. So
sorry, I sent a different Hiroko.
Yeah, Professor Craig Eliphaz, Subramanian, thank you very much for joining.
Well, thank you.
Should we just start, Didi Kim, or we just wait a couple of minutes more?
Shall we start? You can start now.
Okay, I just say introduction a little bit, and then I give the floor to you. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm glad I can see you again. We continue from yesterday. So I'm not gonna have a long explanation like yesterday, but the rule is please turn off your microphone when you're not speaking, and turn on your you can choose turn on your video or not. So for the attendees that you cannot video, you cannot mute your microphone by yourself. But if you want to ask question, raise your hand, and then I will text you, private message you, confirm that you are gonna speak or not. So and then we will give you the floor to talk later in the Q&A. I think that's and then if you have a if you want to ask question, you can put your question on the Q&A. Yes, Mr. Subramania? Yeah. You want to talk? Okay. If not, I think without further ado, I will invite Deputy Dean Chujul Kim to open our webinar today. Didi Kim, the floor is yours.
So, Della, so the Chris is supposed to do that.
Is that Chris doing the opening?
Yeah. So that's what we heard, right? No?
Oh.
No.
News to me, but happy to do so if
Okay,
needs
so
be.
Yeah, please, Chris, please do those. So appreciate if you do.
Okay. So just bear with me for a moment. Okay, just whilst everybody is joining. Here we are. That's good. I have everything I need, I think. So welcome back, everybody. I think a very useful, interesting, and even enjoyable day yesterday. We covered a lot of ground, and I think it came to a very natural but very good conclusion with Pascal Saint-Amand bringing us up to date with what had been happening in terms of the OECD and digital taxation, but more broadly as well. So that was a very interesting day. We start off the second day with a keynote address from Professor Craig Elif from New Zealand. So I'll introduce Craig, and then Craig, we can probably get underway a little bit early, give you a little bit more time if that's okay with you. So Before taking the chair at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, Craig was a tax partner at KPMG for 14 years and also a tax partner at Chapman Tripp, which is New Zealand's largest law firm, for 9 years. His research areas, particularly in international tax, tax avoidance, capital gains tax reform. His latest book, and it's right on point to our webinar, is Taxing the Digital Economy, Theory, Policy and Practice, published by Cambridge University Press, and it'll be published next month, February 2021. He's the director of the University of Auckland's Master of Taxation Studies program, written extensively on tax issues, member of the New Zealand Committee of the International Fiscal Association, the tax advisory group of Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, and has served on the permanent scientific committee of the International Fiscal Association, and was a member of the New Zealand government tax working group just the year before last now, 2018, 2019, where they came up with a number of very significant reforms. So Craig, hand over to you, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chris, and it's a pleasure. I wish we were all together, apart from being on the screen, as it were. The presentation which I'm going to run through, and which Swati, you can pop up now if you would like, really is building on the discussions that you had in the previous sessions, and Pascal outlined the tax challenges. This is sort of really, to a certain extent, going digging into those and saying what really were the problems, or are the problems, of the existing international tax framework. And let's be honest, in the 1920s, that's really nearly 100 years ago, it's been a remarkably successful system, and generally speaking, the cracks and the problems associated with it have really started to become much clearer and are exacerbated by the ability to transact business in the way in which the large global digital multinationals have been able to do. And next slide, please. So both in the book and in an article that I'll give you a reference to, I believe, and sort of like always open to additional ideas and feedback, that I think there are 7 major challenges that arise from this extraordinary compromise that took place in the 1920s. So just a little bit of history, a very small component really. Of course, in 1923, the League of Nations asked for economists, 2 from wealthy countries and 2 from capital importing countries, to devise a new set of rules. And of course, in 1923, it was after the horrible consequences of the First World War in terms of the tragedy that took place there, but also the fiscal costs and fiscal tragedy that emerged. Just as an aside, many countries around the world, I think probably more countries around the world, are in phenomenal situations of fiscal indebtedness as percentages of GDP, probably rivaling some of those periods of time just in this current period of time. So it's another driver for international tax changes that we probably need to reflect on arising from the pandemic. Those countries desperate for revenue, many of them actually moved from a territorial system of taxation to worldwide taxation. The consequence of that, of course, was that when you tax foreign sourced income in its jurisdiction and in the country of residence as well, is that you're going to end up with much greater risk and much greater consequence of double taxation. And the 1920s compromise was designed to reduce the evils of double taxation, as they described it. And essentially, it does that by reducing source taxation, particularly for active income. And so business income and retaining the right of the source country to perform their taxation if they had a nexus with this concept of a permanent establishment, which had risen out of sort of German ideas at the end of the 19th century. So the 7 challenges, I believe, that exist in that system, the first couple, 1 and 2, are particularly digital, but it's what I've described as the vanishing ability to tax business profits, connected to 2 points. The first is this issue of nexus, and the second about how much profit you would actually allocate. And if you think about a highly digitalized business, of course, one of their features operating through these platforms is that they have an absence of a permanent establishment in a jurisdiction. And even if you could, under the existing rules, say that there was a taxing right, what income would you allocate to that jurisdiction? And that's not easy under existing transfer pricing arm's length provisions to formulate a sensible basis for allocating income. The second point is the use of data, the contribution of users and the measurement of their value. These are all peculiar to the digital economy. The role, I think we're all aware of how important and how significant it is for us that when we become members of a social media platform, you know, we contribute in a variety of different ways. For a start, we contribute our network of friends and associates. We contribute material in different ways, and we actually contribute to the brand sometimes by, for instance, providing feedback and quality reviews. So they're all important contributions, and the question is how much value is being created and what taxing rights would be associated with that. There are some more long-standing problems, and they are really points 3 through to 6. And these have been around for a while, but they are exacerbated and by, as I was saying, the burgeoning effect of the digital economy. And if you think about the reliance on a mobility of intellectual property, that's a very good example of something which has become increasingly important, because in addition to these platforms having significant network effects, a lot of just by virtue of the business model, a lot of the value of it comes through data collection and intellectual property rights, and so their ability of these businesses to provide particularly tailored outcomes and results, so that you get, it feels like an email from your digital wine supplying company just at the time that you've finished a bottle of wine, and it manages to identify not only the price point, the type of wine you enjoy, but how much you drank last night. So it really is quite a sophisticated and let's move to the fourth point, the characterization of transactions and income. This is a more sort of recent and slightly problematic characterization of transactions. Think, for example, about some new characters that we have in digital business, such as influencers. Are they actually entertainers? Should they be taxed under Article 17, or are they business profits? And are the Articles 5 and 7 relevant, and that whole PE issue? We also have had for quite a significantly long period of time really a failure of transfer pricing, and I think with a large sophisticated supply chain in significant multinational, there's a lack of comparables between parties, mostly because actually these related parties wouldn't actually do arm's length transactions, such as the particular relationship that they have, that they would be perhaps items of intellectual property that would never leave the group. And so that causes problems, and as does the inadequacy of residence-based taxation. A couple of problems with residence-based taxation. One is the ease of establishing corporate residence, and the second is the separation of shareholder and corporate taxation. You put those two elements together with a failure to tax source profits because of an absence of a nexus or PE, and you have a recipe for global scale multinational tax planning, which involves very little residence tax and very little source tax. And then last but not least is this issue of the competition by states. And I think you can look at this, and we will when we look at the final slide in a different way, because it kind of underlines all the other challenges. Next slide, please, Swati. So what Pascal and the well, not him, but particularly, but what the inclusive framework has developed is this whole idea of an allocation of taxing rights going to the market jurisdiction, to where the transactions are occurring, and it's destination-based taxation, like consumption taxes, and it utilizes a known transfer pricing technique of residual profit allocation, and in the words of the OECD and the inclusive framework, creates a fairer and more efficient allocation of taxing rights. So what's different, what's new and unusual about it? Well, it's this series of steps. None of these things happen under traditional international tax framework architecture. Firstly, we start off with the whole of the groups, the whole of the multinationals' profits. So it's not separately entity accounted. We then, though, take those absolute total group profits, and we separate profits out that are attributable to routine functions. These are functions that are performed as if they were performed by arm's length parties, and we're splitting out the difference between routine functions and non-routine or residual profits. So if you look at the second component, the second sort of pie chart, you'll see the components X and Y. And that's the split out of the residual profits, if you like, the super profits, the economic rents, and the routine profits attributable to bulk standard arm's length transactions. The third step is to allocate a portion of those residual profits to the market jurisdictions. This is the W in the third component. So it goes to the market jurisdictions. The V is retained by the residence countries, or let's call them if you like, the multinational parent, or whichever entity is not operating in the market jurisdiction. And then you'll see that gets allocated to the particular countries in which they have traded and where they meet the requisite thresholds. So the next slide, please. So let's then think about how these particular components meet or answer the challenges that I outlined in the first slide. And it's amazing, really. What surprised me in writing the book was that what started as, you could say was sort of like very much focused on a digital process by itself, but actually Pillar 2 is incredibly important in this, which is more about, it's often referred to as sort of kind of BEPS 2. It's a bolstering and a sort of control foreign companies on steroids, a need to support some of the various components. So the pillar 1 is amount A and amount B, which I haven't discussed. Also, I'm very conscious that I haven't had time and haven't really talked about the other pillar 2, apart from that, what those brief comments about it being generally of an anti-avoidance nature. And if we think back to the problems that we have with the ability to tax those business profits, it's really dealt with by Pillar 1, by these components. The fact that we have that amount A, which I explained on the previous slide, coming into, yes, no, sorry, go back actually, which I explained on the previous slide. Can we just go back to the previous slide? That's it. That we have components of income being allocated to the market jurisdiction, and so it's not only breaking this this nexus requirement, because there is no PE required, but it's also allocating an amount of income based on those residual profits. And that also deals with the use of data, the contribution of users, and the measurement. That's quite problematic, which the digital services taxes were otherwise examining. So how do we deal then with intellectual property and with transfer pricing? The answer is it's not through Pillar 1, it's through Pillar 2. It's when the intellectual property is located. If it's located in a low tax jurisdiction, then that's going to be included as income under the income inclusion rule in under Pillar 2, or we will disallow deductions for payments. Next slide, please, Swati. And then you'll see that the various components, they split into both A and Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 when we're dealing with the characterization of transactions, the failure of transfer pricing, the inadequacy of residence-based transaction, and competition from states. Now, just to make sure that I keep us on time, I want to wrap up with some final comments on this issue of competition by states, because I think it's integral to the extraordinary amount of cooperation that is occurring at the minute. The inclusive framework is a much broader group than has ever been involved before, and they are obviously, and many of you will be, sort of either part of it or familiar with what's going on. But I would say it's an extraordinary attempt, and it is in one sense, I think, and it's another way to view it. It's actually overcoming competition, because there are some jurisdictions that have they've got the march on the rest of the world by the size and extent of their digital businesses, and particularly the United States. And so there is a tax competition aspect to this whole 2020s compromise, where they are predominantly US, but also some very large Chinese and other entities, which will be affected in one way or another. And I guess this competition aspect and this crossroads aspects all comes about to a conclusion as to whether the world moves down a route of reforming into a 2020s compromise in the way in which they've articulated, or whether we end up with a series of unilateral taxes and trade wars, which one hope does not occur. And then the last slide, thank you, and that's really kind of the end of it. On the last slide, which is just the ending slide, there is a reference to a further paper if you want any further information and you need something to make sure that you sleep well, then there's one. Thank you.
Craig, thank you very much indeed. And just for the benefit of everyone, I believe that we will be putting up all of the slides, PowerPoints will be available to all the participants. If somebody could just confirm that, either Nella or Swati, that'll be the case, that we will be able to access all those slides in due course. No? Okay. Perhaps
Yeah,
not.
Professor Chris, yeah, thank you for mentioning. I'll share the link for the slides.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, Craig, thank you for so succinctly identifying the critical issues in relation to the flaws of the current architecture, and how the current approach is sort of addressing those. Again, really complex stuff, but put over in a very succinct fashion. Thanks for that. And if the slides aren't enough, and if the article isn't enough, then there's a book that goes with it, and there's a complementary book from the ADBI as well, which will explain all of it. I've been asked to just briefly mention that the number of participants that we have in the webinar. I think yesterday I saw at times we were over 100 and sometimes 110 participants. Today we're up to 80 already, which is fantastic to see. So it's great that we've got such a wide, broad audience for this. And I'm just checking whether there are any specific questions related to Craig's presentation, but I'm also conscious that we're moving towards the time when we need to start the next session. So I'm going to leave those, they can be answered later on, but we'll deal with those separately. So at that point, we will, I think, leave the introductory session, thanking Craig once again. Nella, I think, or Swati needs a picture of us all, so we all need to be back on screen to the extent that we can be. And
Yes, thank you, Professor Chris, and thank you, Professor Craig. I think before we go to the next session, we will take a screenshot again. Please turn on your camera, your video, and Swati and me will take a picture of all of us. Yansu.
Thank you, Nela.
Yes, Yansu and Tapan Sarkar. What is
Okay. I would like to request everyone to open their camera and please allow me to capture your beautiful smiles. One more time, please. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you very much, everyone. So now we move to our session 3 today. This will be about the vision and challenge of digital taxation, case studies from Asia and the Pacific. So we have our chair today, Dr. Farhad Tagizades Hesari. He's an associate professor in the Tokai University, and he also one of the editor of our book. So we work together and give feedback to you. And so let me read his bio. So before he worked in the Tokai University, he also assistant professor in Waseda University. And he also granted the Excellent Young Researcher status from the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, and Science and Technology of Japan. And he completed his PhD from KU University and with the scholarship from the government of Japan. I think without further ado, I give the floor to Farhad.
Thank you very much, Nela, for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to join this event, and I'm grateful to ADBI for organizing this event and also for supporting this book project. And so today in this session, which is on the visions and challenges of digital taxation, case studies from Asia and Pacific, we are going to have 2 presentations, and then after that we will have the country perspectives. We will have presentations by the country representatives. So the first presenter, our first distinguished presenter, is Dr. Yumin Lee, assistant professor at SILC Business School of Shanghai University, and it's a joint paper with Mingquan Liu, professor at the School of Economics of Peking University. So Dr. Lee, please. Yes. So the presentation is going to be 10 minutes, and then after that we will have 10 minutes for the discussion, and after all, question and answer. Please.
Okay, thank you. Let me first share the screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, it is clear.
Okay. Okay, it's a pleasure to be back again to talk about China's tax reform in the digital economy. So this chapter is mostly big picture stuff. So so it's not on a specific issue or topic. It's mostly a big picture of the whole situation, the progress, and the challenges. So I'll briefly introduce the scale of China's digital economy now and the taxation challenges. And I will talk about some recent tax system reforms in China and some suggestions we have for the way forward. So firstly, China started late in its digital economy than many OECD countries, but the rapid development of a domestic market and technology helped China to catch up with many OECD countries. Currently, China's digital economy ranked second in terms of scale in the world. And although the overall digitalization rate is not among the highest, but the scale is enormous, and China has been ahead of the world in several fields. In this picture, it shows in 2018, the digital economy in China is already 35% of the total GDP. Road-specific fields, China is quite ahead, including e-commerce transactions and mobile payments. And since the outbreak of COVID-19, the sales and the market shares of the digital economy actually grows even faster. In many areas like telecommuting and telemedicine and again, the e-commerce transactions, all these fields gain even more momentum after the pandemic. But China's digital economy, of course, has lots of issues. The first one is it's very unbalanced. There is a significant regional gap in China's digital economy. The eastern region is much more digitalized than the central and the western region. And also the implementation of some legal regulations on digital economy has been difficult. For example, there is a debate over monopoly and the dynamic competition of roads platforms. And also some platforms might have illegal use of their user information, and there's some malicious competition among digital platforms. And lastly, and also very importantly, there is a urgent challenge of taxation under the digital economy. And I will talk about more on that here. So to tax the domestic digital economy, there is a common issue of missing objects of a taxation, because the digital economy depends significantly on intangible assets like R&D, like data and user-generated information. And all these are very difficult to determine, like who to tax and how much to tax. And also it's very difficult to tax the digital service industry, as also road values are very hard to quantify. And also in digital economy, actually, although the data is everywhere, we have a lot amount of data, but actually the data could be unreliable. So the tax authority might not have access to the true data for the sales. For example, in the e-commerce platforms, many self-employed small business operators, like in China we call them C2C sellers, they don't pay any tax as their monthly income are mostly less than the tax exemption threshold. So so basically all C2C sellers, they don't pay tax. And also they have the motivation to fake their sales and their post-sale reviews to gain competitive advantage, because consumers like to buy goods with large sales and positive reviews. So these sellers could sell some products to, for example, to their friends, but only make a delivery of a small amount of the goods and refund the money to their friends. But in this case, they on the platform, it seems they have lots of sales, so the data could be very beautiful, but in reality, they didn't sell those goods and they didn't make that much of money. Last year, in June 2020, lots of C2C stores are required to check their income and expenditure by the tax authority for the past 3 years to pay their overdue taxes, because because the tax authority have the data from the platforms. It seems they earn lots of money. They should pay taxes, but like I explained earlier, these data are actually fake. So lots of these C2C sellers, they complained they would go to bankruptcy if they really had to pay the tax. So eventually, the government suspended the collection as it's in the pandemic, right? The government wants to support the recovery of the economy. And lastly, China don't have any digital economy specific tax laws or regulations. China mostly just collects traditional taxes like value added tax and income tax for all the firms, just like the traditional economy. They don't have any new rules or regulations for this digital economy. Okay, to tax those multinationals, there are some challenges as well. But these challenges are quite common, actually, I think, for all the countries. Some companies would avoiding establishing physical entities in China, but directly sell stuff to Chinese residents and bypassing the tax supervision in China. And also many multinationals might minimize their taxable income in China by maximizing their spending in China by paying interest and royalties and service fees to their subsidiaries in other countries. Okay, China's tax system has been undergone several rounds of reforms since the 80s. In the 80s, the local governments are entitled substantially for the tax rights. So in the 90s, the central government has very small share in the tax revenue. So in the 1994, the government had a tax sharing reform, basically set up two parallel tax authorities, one for the central government and one for the local governments, which makes the central government has a much bigger share of the tax revenues. Starting in 2004, China transformed the business tax into value-added tax to the service industry, which eliminates the double taxation problem. And in 2018, the government reformed the actually merged the previously parallel national tax authority and local tax authority into one unified management system. And since last 2 or 3 years, China has been reduced its tax rates for various reasons, especially last year since the outbreak of the COVID-19, just to promote the economic recovery. But overall, tax reforms are quite general for the whole economy. specific to the digital economy, China has been doing some measures, but I think these measures are mostly like very preliminary. Um, uh, they don't solve all those issues I just mentioned, but I think they're going, hopefully they're going to the right direction. Firstly, starting in the 90s, there is a golden tax project.
So 1 minute remaining.
Okay, I will be very quick. So this golden tax project established nationwide data sharing and cross-check and electronic invoicing, etc. And in 2018, there is a e-commerce law. China passed the e-commerce law, which requires all the e-commerce sellers to pay tax. But reality is many C2C sellers still don't pay any tax. Yeah, the other stuff are minor actually. Okay. So for the suggestions, so firstly, I think the reform should be fair and neutral. So the C2C transactions has to be covered by the tax collection. That's the first one. The second one is China should accelerate the legislation process, both in terms of the domestic measures and international rules. Thirdly, China should, I think the government should cooperate with the platforms, as in digital economy, platforms are like the major business models in lots of industries. So government can cooperate with the platforms to collect tax, which will make the system much more efficient. That's actually, that's basically all of the chapter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for the interesting presentation on the China's taxation reform in the digital era. So next, we are going to have our discussants on this paper. Professor Adrian Sawyer, professor at the Department of Accounting and Information System, University of Canterbury, New Zealand. Professor Sawyer.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to do is to highlight some of the comments and observations I have, and then I will send through to the authors a more detailed one. So rather than go through detail, let's focus on the main points. So I'd like to start by thanking ABDI, the book editors, and all those involved for the opportunity to be the discussant on this chapter. I have a close interest with tax developments in China, and I've been a visitor and spent time over there, so I was very pleased to have this chapter to be able to look at. I enjoyed reading it. I found it to be very informative and offered insights into what further reform could or should occur in China. And a number of the suggestions that are offered in the chapter I think are very useful. And the chapter gives a good overview of how, excuse me, China has moved to be, rather than working on its own, to become part of the more global and international tax system. It talks about some of the challenges that China faces as a country, and also the challenges that it faces that are not just for itself, but also for countries globally around the world. It talks about how one of the big changes has been the move to create or emerge with what would be called a traditional VAT, and that in itself is a very interesting development. So with that sort of background, there's a few points that I'd like to make for the authors to consider how I think the chapter could possibly add some more insights. One of the points to think about is, as China moves forward, how much guidance should it take or look to see what OECD countries are doing versus what other emerging and developing countries are doing, and consider the advantages and disadvantages of both approaches. That might give an idea of what might signal some of the direction that China may take. There's also a comment in there about the fact that there was a number of taxes that were owing, and the State Administration of Tax decided not to have that tax collected. That in a way is a bit like offering a tax amnesty. And I think it would be useful to make a comment about, having done that, what does that do potentially to affect compliance levels going forward? Because the literature does often suggest that once you've had an amnesty, other taxpayers might feel a little bit annoyed that they've paid tax and these other people are getting away. So it might be just useful to have a wee bit of a comment there. Related to my first point is the whole issue about how the definition of a permanent establishment has been extended with the OECD changes, and maybe something to think about as to what extent should China maybe adopt some of that extension, or should it take a different path? And that partly relates to what should be the roadmap going forward for China. In relation to the discussion about the movement to a VAT, I had a student a few years ago from China who did a master's thesis, which does an in-depth analysis of the reasons behind and how that change came about. So I'll send through the details because I think it does give some very useful insights. There was mention in the paper of this organization called the International Tax Policy Research Center, and I was very interested. And what I'd like to have is maybe some comments about what its contributions have been done to date. That would be very helpful, I think. Like all papers, when you're talking about any of the OECD's work on the digitization, the moment you write something, it's virtually out of date. So that will be a challenge to try and make sure that's up to date as possible, whatever the cutoff point is. There's also discussion in the paper about the formula apportionment approach to dealing with things. And I think it would be useful to have a brief mention to the leading papers in the literature there and what are some of the challenges, and maybe reflections on whether the authors think this might actually happen or not on a global basis. We know it happens within the US, but could it be used more broadly? And some commentators have suggested some of the work on digitization is in part possibly moving down that line. So that's another thing to think about. And the last point I would make in terms of general comments for considering is when it comes to the conclusion, perhaps a little bit more on the author's views of what they think might happen going forward. So it's, I think, important to state what you think the issues are, but perhaps some foresight on maybe what might be the approach to dealing with those issues. So I would conclude by saying that I was delighted to have the opportunity to be able to read this chapter, be able to look at some of the things that have happened that in some cases I wasn't aware of, and others giving some new perspectives. And also, I do hope that some of the comments that I've made will be helpful in finalizing the chapter. And as I said, I will finalize this and I'll send through the detailed notes. So there isn't at this point, I think, a necessary point of having written down all the things that I've said. So that's all I want to say at this point, and I'll hand it back to Fahad.
Thank you very much, Professor Sawyer, for discussing the paper. So before we move to Q&A session, Dr. Lee, if you would like to respond to the comments and points that raised by Professor Sawyer.
Thank you very much for Professor Sawyer. All these comments are very good and very interesting ones, and lots of them I don't have any answers because they are I think very quite good and deep. So I would love to see your list and notes, and I will discuss with my co-author and make further revisions. Thank you very much.
That's right.
Okay.
I'll get those through to you hopefully in the next couple of days.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Okay. So thank you very much. So let's first, before I open the floor, so let's check the comments and questions that we have in a Q&A box. Dr. Bamadev asked Professor Liu, thanks for sharing China's experience of digital economy. What do you suggest developing countries to move on such economy? What are further prerequisites to proceed toward digitalization for developing countries in the years to come? because China had very good experience for the digitalization of the economy. So the share of digital economy in the total GDP of China is almost 35%, according to the most recent data. So what are the requirements for developing countries in order to reach to this level of digitalization? So do you want to answer now?
I think that the question is quite difficult, and so for China, it's a little bit special because China has very large domestic markets, and the education and technology advancement in the last maybe 20 years has been fast. So, and also the infrastructure has been quite good. So I don't know, all these factors, and also quite developmental governments, developmental states, all helped on the transformation of the economy. So I don't know whether these characteristics could be useful for other developing countries. Yeah.
Okay, so the another question that we have is from Mr. Sashi Atota. Do the factors for determining a market country's share of profit take into consideration the value added by network effect to the intellectual property and business model of a company? So is this question from Dr. Lee or from our previous session, I mean from our keynote speech?
Yeah, I think
sorry, I think it was for the previous session. I had posted it actually at the end of the previous session. I'm sorry. I think it's
okay. So later on, we will ask our keynote.
I did have one question though for on this topic is what is the framework that China follows in designing its tax policy? I'm referring to a framework on the lines of Adam Smith's canons of taxation. What are the principles that China considers as being critical for designing a tax policy that should meet those principles?
I'm sorry, I don't actually know what's like how to summarize the framework of China's policy. It has been evolving all the time, so I'm not sure there are some like principles that never changed. So
thank you, Professor.
yeah, so I don't
also
know
have
what
one
are the
question.
principles.
Okay, so I also have one question. So China, I mean, since the share, as I've mentioned, since the share of digital economy increased a lot in China, especially during the recent years, so Chinese government is planning for taxing giants such as Alibaba, Didi, Tencent, and so on. So as we all know, so taxing giants, it's not an easy work. Currently, globally, more than almost 130 countries are working together in order to find a solution that how should we tax Amazon, Google, Facebook, and still they didn't reach to a rigid conclusion. So it means that taxing giants, especially for those companies that they have international businesses and transactions, so it is an international issue. It's not a domestic matter. Among Chinese tax giants, for example, Alibaba is also not, it's not only domestic, it's providing services globally. Some of these giants are domestic oriented only. So I would like to know that if Chinese government wants to join the international negotiations and wants to reach to an international agreement for taxing Chinese, giant technology companies, and also at the same time for other companies. So is there any plan in the government of China? Do you have any information?
I don't know. I don't have any information, but currently, I think the government has initiated like a campaign to do some anti-monopoly movement on these giants. So I didn't hear anything on text in them. So I will pay attention to them and do some digging. Okay. And if
Because
there's
that
something
framework,
relevant, I will.
because that framework would be interesting. If there is any solution inside China, that would be interesting. And I've seen that many participants, they also asked that question. Okay, Dr. Subramanian, I hear that you have a question. So please ask your question.
First of all, I just wanted to ask the same question which you have mentioned yourself regarding the international tax policy issues. How does China handle the global digital companies taxation in the absence of physical presence in a particular country like China? The same issue we are facing in India also. So as such, I would like to have your views, number one. And number two is you mentioned about the fake data, sales data, which is coming in. Of course, it would be applicable more in the case of smaller companies, e-commerce companies. But what happens, if even global digital companies also, what is the guarantee that, they would be giving the genuine data? And number three is about your views on the from China. What is the impact of COVID-19 pandemic in relation to the China's taxation measures or anything? If you have, could you please share with us? That's it.
The last one, can you repeat the last one? COVID-19 on what?
COVID-19, the impact of COVID-19 on the tax reforms.
On tax reforms. Okay. Okay, for the first one, taxing the giants, I think the discussion is not, there isn't so much discussion on that because mostly these giants are mostly domestic, right? So I know they have some presence in other countries, maybe lots of them, but I think mostly maybe their money are from the domestic markets. But I will certainly check any like more plans or more discussions on that and include that on the chapter if there is anything. Also about fake data, you're talking about like these giants could be generating some fake data as well, right? So I think the platforms obviously knows the phenomenon, knows the situation. So I don't know whether they have a stand on this issue. So yeah, I will check the discussion on that one as well. So the last one, I think COVID-19 is mostly bad for the whole economy. So I don't think it affects the tax system reform. So the government mostly just reduced tax rates and rolled out some tax subsidies to many firms which are badly affected by the COVID-19.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Subramanian and Dr. Lee. So since we are running out of time, there is a question, one more question that let me ask it from the chat box from Mr. Dhruba Paudial is asking that modeling taxation is hardly replicable for different spatial locations. However, it gives plenty of information and can be drawn to be taken care. Could you please mention the spatial ones? Yeah, it means experience of one country is not completely replicable to other region, but maybe there are some points that could be learned from other countries. Can you mention some of these special points? or it is very general?
Yeah. So I don't have anything on the mind, but I will think about that, include that in the chapter if I have anything. Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lee. So let's move to the second presenter of this session. The second paper is on digital revolution, blockchain as a driver for the rule of law in tax administration in China. So the presenter is Dr. Yan Zhu, Associate Professor at the UNSW, Sydney, Australia, and this is a joint paper with Shiping Jian, who is a professor at East China University of Political Science and Law. Dr. Zhu, mic is yours, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me share my screen first. Okay, can I see my screen?
Yes, please, just please make it full screen.
Okay. It's good now?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. Thank you very much for your introduction, Farah, and also thank the ADBI for the kind invitation to participate in this exciting project. It's my great honor to discuss our research here. To clarify first, the topic you mentioned actually was the topic we used initially. But after we finished the paper, we thought rule of law and the tax administration are two separate issues, and with the better to focus on one issue in one paper. So we currently, our paper is focused on blockchain for tax administration. And this paper, the research, as you mentioned, is conducted by Professor Zeping and Zhang from East China University of Political Science and Law, and me. And our paper focuses on how disruptive technology, in particular blockchain, have impacted on China's tax administration. And specifically, we examined key issues China's tax authorities face in tax administration and how blockchain technology can be positioned to address the issues. We also discussed the prospects and the limitations of blockchain technology in China's further modernization of tax administration. As many speakers have discussed already, we are experiencing an extraordinary technological advancement, which is labeled the fourth industrial revolution. Blockchain, with its distinctive features, such as transparency, accountability, and decentralization, etc., has been actively explored by governments throughout the world. These features can be utilized to assist and improve tax administration, as well as to enhance tax compliance. With this greater potential, we asked in our paper, to what extent can technology contribute to the modernization of tax administration in developing and transitional economies? And these economies usually have a relatively weak administrative capacity to effectively enforce taxes and to grapple with new challenges. Our paper focuses the question on developing economies using China as a case study. China was chosen because it has been at the forefront of technological innovation in the world, and the government has been keen to use blockchain to modernize its tax administration and to deal with serious tax enforcement issues that have been persistent in the country for years. Whether blockchain can be an effective instrument to achieve these goals, and this is what we want want to find out from our research. Here is just a very brief overview of China's tax administrative system. The development of the system is behind the development of the tax law system in the country. Tax administration used to be largely based on manual operation, and the use of modern information technology only started from the 1990s. However, the government has since made a significant effort to modernize the system. A very important development is the introduction of the Golden Tax Project in 1994. The GTP was introduced with the aim to combine the tax fraud and to improve tax collection especially regarding the tax, the value-added tax, VAT. With the completion of the last phase, phase 3, the GTP has now become a powerful information system, linking tax data across all levels and regions of tax administration in the country. However, our research shows some serious issues remain. One issue is distortion of information. It is not uncommon that the taxpayers fabricate false information in order to avoid taxes or reduce taxes or to obtain other business benefits. A typical example in China's context is the use of tax invoices. The invoice has traditionally and until now been the major source of information for tax authorities to obtain tax-related information. And probably it is because invoices are used as sole legitimate evidence to verify VAT import tax claims and to obtain export VAT refunds, and that VAT invoices have become very valuable in practice, and probably even more, much more valuable than money itself. VAT invoice-related fraud has been rather rampant in China. So the GTP last phase 3, has improved the invoice management systems, but it has not solved the problem of disconnection between actual transactions and the use of invoices, leaving the issue of distortion of information unresolved. A second issue relates to insufficient information exchange within tax administrations. There are, in short, there is a backlog of a great amount of taxpayer information built up in the information systems over the years. Tax authorities seem to have not been able to process the information. And there is also a lack of communication between different tax data sets. A related issue is the lack of information exchange between tax department and other government departments, and also between tax departments with social organizations and business entities. And these issues have reduced the efficiency and the fairness of tax enforcement and compliance in the country. So blockchain technology might help address the issues. And this slide illustrates very briefly how blockchain works. It shows how information moves through distributed ledgers in blocks using mining as an example. Blockchain, essentially, it is defined and operated as a distributed and decentralized ledger. At its very basic, blockchain can be added to, but not modified, suggesting it is secure. And its replacement of a decentralized third party for, I'm sorry. Sorry for the interruption. Sorry, I wanted to say here, it's a replacement of a third centralized third party for the provision of trust means it cannot be easily manipulated by a single party. Once a record is secured into blocks of interest, and the record is known to the public, and no one would be able to change the record. So these features of blockchain can be of great use in addressing the issues of information asymmetry and insufficient information exchange under China's tax administration systems.
So 2 minutes remain.
Sure, thank you. I don't know why I couldn't move my.
So if you're okay.
All good. So here, our paper examines the blockchain pilot project in Shenzhen. As many of you may have already known, Shenzhen is one of the most developed cities in China, and it has been considered China's Silicon Valley. And the Shenzhen blockchain invoicing system was rolled out in summer 2018. It fully integrates transaction parties and payment service providers, WeChat delivery, and the tax authorities. So yeah, there are some details about the Shenzhen pilot project because I don't have much time left. So I will skip all the detailed information here. Apparently, blockchain has greater potential to assist tax authorities in managing tax matters. Like many jurisdictions, China has been keen to explore blockchain for public administration on one hand, but on the other hand, it has been quite cautious about potential risks the technology may pose to the security of sovereignty due to its decentralized feature. Probably it's because of these potential risks that some commentators in China have raised the concept of sovereign blockchain and suggest the blockchain technology should be used within a very clearly defined legal framework. And some also suggest that the blockchain can be further utilized in the area of taxation, like automation of tax collection and the daily tax management. Limitations. Blockchain is a promising technology, but it does have limitations. For example, not all blockchains have the supposed distinctive features like transparency, immutability, and trustworthiness, etc. Also, blockchain will not be able to accommodate challenges in interpreting open-ended legal terms and unforeseeable events that have long existed in the legal systems. So for example, blockchain will not be able to explain what just reasonable means in specific contexts. So yeah, and also for taxpayers, blockchain cannot help them to fully digest a vast volume of tax circulars issued by the tax authorities in the country, and to keep pace with very frequent changes in taxation matters. So to conclude, blockchain is a disruptive technology, and the exploration of the technology in China has shown its promising potential to tackle information asymmetry and insufficient information exchange and improve tax administration. But it is not a panacea or magic bullet, and its potential to improve tax administration is limited. It's necessary, I think in my view, to take a cautious approach to applying the technology to taxation, because otherwise it would just simply waste resources without leading to designed and positive outcomes. And that's the end of my presentation. Sorry for the delay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zhu, for your interesting presentation on the blockchain and the application of it for in taxation. So next, I would like to invite Dr. Tapan Sarkar of Griffith University, Australia, for discussing this paper. Dr. Sarkar, please. So your mic is mute, Dr. Sarkar. Your mic is mute. Please unmute it.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's clear.
It's
Just
clear.
please change the display setting because now we are seeing your view. On the top, display setting, switch it.
Switch it to
On the top, can you see the display setting?
display. Yeah, display setting. What do I have to do?
And then swap it. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Wu and Mr. Professor Zhang. I really enjoyed reading this paper, but I do have some critical comments about it as well. So let me move on. This paper is focusing on a very interesting topic, which is contemporary topic. So thank you, because there has not been many studies looking at this issue, obviously. And the authors, they have highlighted this role of digital technology in particular as a fourth industrial revolution. And China is a good case study, the right case study to look at as well. And also the previous presentation also showed, Professor Lee, that China is one of the early adopters. So that gives us a lot of lessons for other countries as well. So that's a great start. Now, as far as I gathered, that the key objective of this is to what extent can technological advancement contribute? So it could be advancement to contribute to the modernization. So it is a bit of examination of whether a technological advancement can contribute. Now, the key issue that as a reader I found, and also someone who worked in a tax administration, how do we measure the advancement? This is a very, very important. One way could be that higher compliance. That is something that we can, at least a surrogate measure of contribution. So my first question to start with is, what are we going to see the change? You're going to see a positive change through the use of this intervention, which is blockchain or technological advancement. What are you going to see? What sort of improvement are you going to see? Because there have been many issues that we can talk about. Now coming into my comments. So the paper has a focus on developing economies. As you see that if you go back to your presentation, specifically into your the aims as well, where you looked at developing economies in general, and then China as a case study. So now I really looked at literature, that where are the literature globally that is also talking about adoption of blockchain or digital technology, and how this has made an impact or improvement other places. This is happening not just in China, but everywhere. That could have given the readers an overview that, okay, what is others compared to what's happening in China, and that could be more interesting work. Second comment is very specific to tax administration. And I think I mentioned a little bit that what are we specifically going to improve through this intervention? Are we going to improve efficiency? I think, to me, yeah. Are we going to also see that it is helping to build capacity? I hope so. Now we really need to make sure actually that, and explicit about it, that what is the ultimate goal? Is it that this technology is helping us with enhanced or well-equipped administration? I guess so. And then to pose this question that you really need to be a bit more explicit about that, how this is going to help. Otherwise, this paper is quite general that, okay, this is happening and that. Also on top of this, the case study of Shenzhen is a relatively developed, or not relatively, just a developed part of China. And with a single case study, you are saying the whole China, which is a little bit odd, because you really need to also see that lesser developed part of China, at least, to say that what's happening in the whole China as well. So that's a bit of thought, but I know that it is a bit of initial paper, a bit of overview is fine, but you are talking about whole China, right, in your paper. My third and final comment is about use of blockchain technology. And as you will appreciate that within a tax system, it's not the tax administration. There is the key stakeholder who are the taxpayer and the big and large corporations too. And they are also utilizing this technology and blockchain technology as well. And we really need to equally think about their part as well, that how information asymmetry and distortion of information are being impacting those corporations and taxpayers in general as well. So yeah, while the author have discussed about this limitation, I think these are some of the things that you really need to really go through within this paper. Finally, yeah, it is an exploratory paper and based on literature review, but although you're saying that it is a case study of St. James, so we really need to look at some future study for sure, following this study that is looking at some more in-depth study involving stakeholders, which are both the principal and the agent. You know, the agent here is the tax administration, the principal here is the taxpayer. And what is their view? What are the challenges they think are in implementing this? At this moment, that is the missing thing. We are only talking about based on literature and as such. So that is what could be a future study from here. Finally, I wanted to see a bit of conceptual framework and a model as well that you could easily pull together, that how one is impacting the other by including the blockchain at the very center to really link that how this is impacting the other. So thank you once again, and I hope that this is helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sarkar, for discussing this paper and bringing very interesting points. So, Dr. Zhu, do you want to answer to the comments that raised by Dr. Sarkar?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks very much for the comments, Saka. Thank you very much. I think all the comments are very useful. Actually, there is a limitation of our research because at the moment the blockchain technology is only the pilot is only taking place in Shenzhen. And some other developed cities in China, for example, Beijing and Hangzhou, and I'm not sure about Shanghai, yeah, but also very developed cities in China have followed suit. I'm not aware of any developing region or city in the country that has considered trialing or having a pilot project in their respective jurisdiction. So I guess this is a limitation. What I can do with regard to the discussion of developed cities, developed regions in the country, at this stage would probably be based on what they have been dealing in the past, especially with the Golden Tax Project and the GTP. It was completed in 2016. As far as I know, many local regions, especially those in underdeveloped areas, have still been trying to understand and get good at using the relevant information system. It's a big system, it's a giant, it's quite comprehensive, but it takes time for those regions to fully understand and be able to utilize. So I guess my discussion about the blockchain potential in those regions would be just based on their experience on the Golden Tax Project. I also agree with you about the measurement of change. if we want to argue there are some changes, positive changes, probably we would better provide some concrete like metrics and statistics to show, yeah, it is working and it is working very well, or it is not working, and then we can say we can try to do some further research to say why it is not working. Yeah, but that requires data. Unfortunately, how do you say this? Doing research on China tax law is not very easy because it's not easy, or it's difficult to get data, statistics we want from the government, from empirical research. It is quite hard. The information we got for the Shenzhen pilot is actually from some like personal network with people working in Shenzhen. So what I guess what I'm suggesting is data and the statistics are of course very important and can be very useful, but can be very hard to get with regard to some real information. We will try. Yeah, hopefully we can get some. Yeah, and also, yeah, definitely we will consider including more literature of other jurisdictions of the world development in the revision of our paper. And also we will add more discussion about taxpayers' taxpayers' experience with blockchain. There was a difference between larger taxpayers and small and medium size and taxpayers. Larger taxpayers would find blockchain useful in their tax compliance, but small taxpayers would not be able to fully utilize these new technologies. But for sure, we will consider this in our revision. So thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zhu and Dr. Sarkar. So before I read the comments and questions that I received in the chat box and also Q&A, I also have questions. So application of blockchain technology in the tax system, it can bring transparency and reduce the asymmetry of information, which is very important. However, it requires some prerequisites, such as, for example, e-invoice system, electronic invoicing, and several others. So in your chapter and in your study, did you find that what are the requirements in order to apply such system? This is the first question. Secondly, at this moment, when we are looking at the current level of technology, even in China, so this framework might be applicable mainly for large enterprises. So for the large enterprises, because of existence of third-party audit system, clear accounts, and so on, so the asymmetry of information is much lower. So when we are talking about the misdeclaration and asymmetry of information, it's mainly for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, that they don't keep books well, there is no auditing system for many of them. But when we are talking about SMEs, maybe having e-invoice system or passing those prerequisites are not possible at this moment. So what do you think about this? Do you think it's only applicable for large enterprises, or gradually SMEs will be part of this story?
Okay, yeah, thanks. These are very, very good questions. So the first question regarding some prerequisites or requirements for the use of electronic invoices, I will just use the Shenzhen experiment as an example. Since under that experiment, those who can apply for the use of electronic invoices are newly added VAT taxpayers. So if you are already in the Golden Tax Project network, there is no need for the relevant taxpayer to apply for joining the blockchain and electronic invoice system. I guess that's, actually my own experience is probably that's just some requirement at the initial stage. At this stage, almost 2 years after 1 year and a half, after the introduction of the electronic invoice system in Shenzhen, it seems all kinds of taxpayers in Shenzhen can use blockchain to issue invoices for the customer, and then the customer pays using some like digital payment applications. And in China, the most popular tools are WeChat Pay and Alipay. So the invoice and the payment will become very automated. Once an invoice is issued and once the payment is made, the invoice will be automatically generated, and the customer will be able to use that electronic invoice to apply to obtain VAT claims. So yeah, that's what Shenzhen is doing. For the second question regarding misinformation, and this is related to tax compliance. This is a really very good question. Actually, I have been asking around some tax practitioners in China and also tax authorities in China. Since their general perception is large companies normally are more tax compliant because they need to follow the accounting standards issued by the government. Unlike Australia, China has issued its own accounting standards, but China's accounting standards are pretty much like the international accounting standards. The government is using the international standards as a reference in formulating its own standing accounting standards. Large companies need to follow these accounting standards. They need to be watched very closely. They will be watched very closely by the tax authorities. It's also like Australia. Within the Central National Tax Authority, there was a specific dedicated department within the tax administration focusing on large companies' tax compliance. So I think by and large, large companies are more tax compliant. So misinformation, distortion of information probably would be more done by small and medium-sized companies. Having said that, actually I have recently read some news about big companies committing VAT invoice-related fraud, which is the relevant amount is substantial. So you cannot really ensure all large companies are tax compliant. I'm just talking about this on average. Large companies would be more tax compliant than small and medium-sized companies. It'll be great to have some concrete data about that. I'm aware my colleagues are doing this research, not just in one jurisdiction, doing this research on quite a number of jurisdictions in the world. So we are hoping to get more concrete data later on. But a very good question, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zhu, for your answers. So we have two questions. The first one is by Mr. Ahmed Al-Ashiq. The question asked to Dr. Sarkar, but I think it should be to Dr. Zhu because she was the presenter, but if Dr. Sarkar wants to answer, that's also okay. So I'm very keen to know that can the blockchain be adopted as an intervention policy to enhance the efficacy of tax administration mechanism in country like Bangladesh? So Dr. Zhu and Dr. Sarkar, if you want to answer, please.
Okay, thanks.
Your mic is mute.
Yeah. Sorry for that. I will be very brief. Very sorry. I know very little about Bangladesh. But just speaking from the basic technical features of blockchain, I think for sure, yeah, blockchain can provide some technological support to improve, for example, transparency and also timely exchange of information between different data sites, and can help improve tax compliance, because with blockchain, it will be difficult for a single party to manipulate the data and also to alter the data once the data is recorded to the blockchain. So I think blockchain can be useful and helpful for tax administration, but it will focus on specific features of a particular jurisdiction's political, legal, and tax system.
Thank you very much. Very good. So, Dr. Sarkar, I know that you know the tax system in Bangladesh very well. You are an expert. So, would you please answer this comment?
Yeah, that's a good question, but through our own research, which we are going to present tomorrow, we have seen that Bangladesh is a very early stage of implementing and digitizing the tax system. But as Professor Ju is saying that it is going to be the future normal. So that's the way forward for the country. And as far as I can see that they are going forward to further enhance this digitization process, including use of blockchain in the tax administration point of view, just for enhancing transparency and efficiency as well. But it's a long way. It's a long way forward for Bangladesh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarkar. So we also have one comment from a question or comment from Dr. Subramanian. What is your solution to hacking of blockchain? According to public data, since 2017, $2 billion stolen blockchain cryptocurrency. This is the data that Dr. Subramanian provided. So what are the issues that need to be considered?
This is a quite important issue and also relates to technology. I think that's why I said, based on our research, at least the Chinese government is very cautious about blockchain technology. Blockchain and Bitcoin, actually Bitcoin is a good example of using blockchain technology to do business. And China, if people are following China's news, they would say they will be aware. And the Chinese government completely banned the transactions of Bitcoin in 2017 because of the potential or real risks of Bitcoin. For blockchain, as we can see here, the exploration of blockchain has been guided by the government. So, and the government is keen to use blockchain to improve, to assist public administration, but it is very cautious about potential risks. So the government is doing the thing with caution, and I guess this is because it doesn't want to say too many risks arising from too rush rolling out of blockchain in the whole country. Technology for sure is a good thing, but it's a double sword. That's why we human beings need to be cautious about. It can do good things if we use it in a wise way. Otherwise, yeah, it can be dangerous. Yeah. I don't have any particular technological solution, but I think a very clear legal framework is needed, and also the government needs to get involved in the development of the use of technology, especially in public administration. Because the public administration has just too much personal and private information, and all those information need to be carefully protected. Okay, yeah, that's my response. But I'm not sure if I have answered the question. Yeah, but thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhu. So there is a final question here asking that any insights about the South Pacific, about using this technology in South Pacific or in Pacific Island countries. So do you want to answer?
Yeah, my apologies again. I know very little about South Pacific, but as I said, the technology doesn't really differentiate between different countries, different people. If you are able to use it, and use it, but when you use it, try to use it in a very wise, sensible way. There was nothing to prevent South Pacific Islands from exploring blockchain and other technologies like big data and artificial intelligence, etc. But there are always requires a delicate balance. How you can utilize, take advantage of these new technologies at the same time, protecting privacy, protecting security of sovereignty, etc. So yeah, I guess that's some question actually facing all jurisdictions in the world.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Zhu, for your interesting presentation, and also to Dr. Tapan Sarkar for discussing, and thanks to the active participation of all participants for asking great questions and the answer. Thank you. So let's move to the next presenter, which is going to presenting the country perspective. We will have a presentation from Afghanistan, Mr. Abdulwali Nouri, Director of Legal Services and Revenue Policy, Afghanistan Revenue Department, Ministry of Finance. Mr. Nouri, please, and you have 10 minutes for presenting. Just please unmute your mic. Your mic is mute now. Yes, it's clear now.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Farhat, and all colleagues for your help. Unfortunately, due to some technical problem and internet facilities, I joined now. As you know, unfortunately, we do not have any specific digital taxation, but overall, we have. I have a presentation I want to present present the overall taxation system of Afghanistan. It's okay?
Yes, please. So do you want to share your screen?
Okay.
Sharing your slides, please share your slides.
Let me try. If I explain the presentation later on, I will share the presentation.
Yes,
it's okay,
or
if the time consumer.
If you already sent your slides to ADBI,
if you can,
I will share this. I will share, but
okay.
Unfortunately, I did not share it.
Yeah, you didn't send us, but if you want us to control the slide, please send right now. But if not, then you can talk and then we can share later.
Okay, I will to talk later on. I will share. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. As you know, the structure of the taxation in Afghanistan, Afghanistan Revenue Department is working under the supervision of the Ministry of Finance, and we have a central office in Kabul, and also we have LTO, MTO, and S2 in Kabul, and also we have 33 provinces offices across the country. And our revenue base is almost, we have three source revenue. One is taxation, second is the custom duties, and also non-taxation. Afghanistan Revenue Department is responsible for the collection of the taxes and also the non-tax revenues. According to the taxation law, we have five type of taxes right now. One is income tax. It includes personal income tax and also corporate income tax. We have business tax, and also we have fixed taxes, and fourth we have withholding taxes, and five we have gains and capital taxes. For the time being, we are not implement the VAT, and we established the law and procedures for the VAT in 1st of January 2022. We will start VAT as well. The income tax is, as I mentioned, is we have corporate income tax, which is imposed on the net profit. For the corporate, we have 20% flat rate, and also for the PIT or personal income tax, we have different rates. It's starting from 0, and then 2, then 10%, and 20%. This is the personal income tax. The second type of the taxes, we have business receipt tax. The business tax is imposed on the gross revenue. We have 10% for the telecommunication, 5% for the international air transport, and 4% for other businesses. For the time being, in our reform agenda is that to replace the VAT, replace the VAT to the business receipt taxes. We need to work on that, but unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 and other technical problem, our work is not complete. I mean, in our homework is not complete. We need to work hard, and till 2022, we need to be ready for implementation of the VAT. The third type of taxes is fixed tax. Fixed tax is imposed in small businesses. For example, for shopkeepers, small restaurants, and other small businesses. And also for the vehicles and transport, on vehicles have the different rates because based on the seats, based on the tonnage, and also the cylinders. This is the fixed tax. Withholding taxes, the fourth type of the taxes. Withholding tax is a mechanism for the collection. We have four type of withholding taxes. One is salaries, and second is the rent on the buildings and other properties. We have withholding tax on the dividends, interest, and also we have withholding tax on the contract. For example, if a person provides services and goes to the other person, if the transaction is more than 500,000 AFs, they have to pay the withholding taxes. The gain tax is on capital tax is also a type of the income tax. For example, in a business or in a personal, they have a capital, for example, home, vehicle, and other property. When they sell, they also subject to tax. For example, if a company sell a property and they gain or have a profit from this sale of the capital, this profit is subject to income tax. And also for the individual, if an individual sale a property, they have to pay 1% from the whole sale of the property. It was the current type of taxes in Afghanistan. In the future, as I mentioned, we will implement the VAT. The VAT have two rates. One is 0 and second is 10% flat rate. Education services, health services, and the basic food, they are subject to 0% or exempt. And the other services all, and goods and services all subject to 10% flat rate. But in the beginning, we have a big amount of the threshold. The threshold is 150 millions. Means if a person have more than 150 million AFs, they will subject to value-added tax. This was a very summary or short explanation of the Afghanistan tax system. And treaty network, unfortunately, we do not sign any DTA or double taxation treaty. For the time being, we enter to negotiation with 4 countries such as Turkey, UAE, Pakistan, and Iran. And soon we will finalize tax treaty with the Turkey. And also we done 2 round negotiation with Pakistan and 2 round with the Iran and 1 round with the Emirates, with the UAE. This was a very short explanation of the Afghanistan tax system. Then over to you. If there is any question, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nouri, for introducing the tax system in Afghanistan and the recent progress. So it was interesting to know. And so if there is any question from the participants.
Okay.
Yes, Professor Chris, please.
Thanks very much. I wasn't sure whether my hand could be seen or not.
Yes, it was clear.
Thank you very much, Abdul Wali. That was very interesting. You mentioned on the capital gains that they were subject to income tax, and you talked about a company selling a property, it would pay tax on the profit that it made. But then you mentioned that for an individual, they would pay tax on 1% of the sale proceeds. It's almost like a turnover tax or a wealth tax there that they've imposed, rather than a capital gains tax. Could you just clarify?
Thank you very much. It's a good question. We classify this type of taxes as property tax, but the property tax is implemented in the other country. It's a little difficult with our case. We have 2 mechanisms for that. First, all the capitals is sold by a company. The company is subject to profit tax. It means the profit will count as a profit, then apply the 20% of the flat rate of the income tax. But for the individuals, because of low capacity of the individuals. There is no any document support. Because of that, we charge 1% from the whole amount or gross amount of the property.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Thank you very much, Professor Chris and Mr. Nouri. So is there any other comments or questions? So if there is any question, please write in the Q&A box. So Dr. Nouri, you raised your hand. Do you want to?
Yes, just for the digital taxation, I need to have a few words. Unfortunately, for the time being, we do not have any specific provision or any specific regulation on the digital taxation. In our agenda, as you know, we are in middle of the tax reform. For that, we need to know the other happening that we will consider in our reform.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So if there is no more question or comment, then we reached to the end of this session. And so then let's conclude this session. And thank you very much. I would like to thank all presenters, whether chapter presenter and our distinguished country representative for presenting insightful presentations, and also to the discussants for discussing the presentations and providing comments for the further improvements of these works. And in addition to the participants for actively participating and asking good questions and comments. Thank you very much to all. So Nella, please.
Thank you, Farhad. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Nouri. You know how hard we try to connect on behind the scene. So finally he made it. So I appreciate your effort for this. So we go for our break. Maybe 12:55. So we can have our break for 5 minutes. Yeah, so you can grab some drinks, walk a little bit, and but we still be online here. If you want to use this intermission as a talking each other, that's also okay. I'm here. So we will come back at 1 p.m. Tokyo time. Thank you and see you soon.
I drive 40 minutes to connect the conference.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Thank you very much.
You know, Farhad, our backup last resort. So if Mr. Nouri cannot connect, so he will talk through WhatsApp, and I will make it online.
Oh, I see.
But fortunately, he can use his computer.
Very good, Mr. Nouri. Thank you very much for joining.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes. That's why I didn't really guide you with the question and answer, because I'm very busy try to solve the internet connection problem. Hi, Swati. Are
Hi,
you there?
Nela.
Yes.
Hi, Nela. Yeah,
Hi.
I'm ready to introduce you.
Okay.
Just give me a shine and I can,
Yes.
yeah.
We start
resume.
like at 1 p.m.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Nela, should I share screen by myself, or I think it's better for me to share screen by myself? Yeah.
Yes, yes. If you have freezing difficulties, I mean, like then Hiroko and Swati will take over. Hi, Swati. How about Bu Evi? Are you behind the screen already? Would we? I think it's good. We should start. Swati.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Okay, let's start the another session, season 4. We already have Nela hosting yesterday and today around with us. I would like to introduce Nela. Dr. Nela Sri Hendriathi has been with ADBI as Senior Capacity Building and Training Economist. And prior to joining the ADBI, she has served as Deputy Director for the G20 Forum at the Fiscal Policy Agency, Ministry of Finance in Indonesia from 2016 to 2019. She also was Senior Compliance Officer in the Indonesian Financial Intelligence Unit from 2005 to 2010 and head of the subdivision of accounting compliance for securities institutions in the Indonesian Capital Market Supervisory Agency, now for the Financial Service Authority, OJK, from 2004 to 2005. She holds a PhD in economics from Victoria University from Melbourne, Australia, and an MSc in finance from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, United States. So welcome, Dr. Nela, and over to you to conduct rest of the session.
Okay, thank you, Swati. Very comprehensive introduction. So good afternoon to all of you. So welcome to session 4, the vision and challenge of digital taxation, case studies from Asia and Pacific. And this is part 2, continuing from the session that chaired by Farhad. So, and my name is Nela Henrieti, and Swati already introduced me, and I will be serving as your moderator today. So, as you know that we listened and involved in the discussion yesterday, and we have a fruitful discussion and how the world now try to set up global consensus for taxation in digital economy, trying to push multilateral approach rather than unilateral approach. Leaders try to find win-win solution in this matter and in the effort not to disturb international trade as well. Besides that, there's also a discussion about how countries can have the right to tax digital companies and digital service fees. And we also have discussion about the benefit of digitalization itself to solve many challenges such as compliance, and we can use like artificial intelligence, blockchain, dispute resolution, and harnessing this digitalization. So in my personal perspective, when I know this, I have a lot of questions in my mind since so when people say that countries should have the right to tax Google based on their activities, in the beginning, I just thinking taxation digital economy just about e-commerce, but now we have Google, so we have Netflix. So I just keep asking myself, how do they know someone if Nela access internet Google from this country, how do they know that I access Google? So, but yeah, there's so much data to analyze. So, but I know that some IT experts out there and policy makers work effortlessly to make it work. So Today we have a lot of discussion about that, and now today's session is not about my thinking, but we have many experts here. So first, I want to introduce Dr. Wawan Juswanto. He's a senior policy analyst in Fiscal Policy Agency, Indonesia, Ministry of Finance. Previously, Wawan worked in ADBI, is exactly what my role right now. So as a senior capacity building and training economist. And then before that, he also earned an MA and PhD in International Development from Nagoya University in Japan. And Wawan will talk about taxing the digitalized economy, emerging market perspective. And then after Wawan, we will have a discussion for this session. There's Miss Dwi Astuti. She held Master of Arts in Economics from Yokohama University in Japan and serving as tax official for more than 25 years. So she involved in many tax treaty and involved in many international negotiation for taxation. And I want to put my disclaimer here. I didn't involve in the change of agenda at the end. This I asked Swati for the last minute change that I end up actually chairing the discussion of my own college from Indonesia Ministry of Finance. So, but I assure you, they are very expert in that area. And this, if I want to know this knowledge information, I always come to them for input. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Wawan. You will have 10 minutes. After that, I will give the floor to Ibu Dwi. Dr. Wawan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Nela. Let me share my screen. Can you see, Nela? It's clear, eh?
Can you put in the slide? So yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nela, for the introduction. And I would like to also thanks to ADBI for hosting this very important event and inviting me to present in this seminar. So as Nela said, that I think this session is Indonesian session, yeah, Nela, yeah. I'm from Indonesia and the moderator also from Indonesia, and the discussion Bu Dwi, also my colleague in Ministry of Finance, and maybe Bu Dwi later even will help me to answer if there are any question, because she is the one who dealing with daily negotiation for this issue. Okay, I would like to present today about the taxing the digital economy in the emerging market perspective, and especially later I will focus on Indonesia. As an introduction, I think previous speakers already mentioned, but I would like to mention again that the digital economy has a huge potential, and especially in Asia, more than half of the Asian population access the internet. And then the size of Southeast Asia internet economy is expected to about 300 billion US dollar in 2025. And 10 ASEAN countries in the global top 20 in e-commerce adoption, with Indonesia adoption is about 88%, Thailand 82%, and Malaysia 82% among the highest. And even now the digital economy become more important in this pandemic situation, and increase in the media consumption at home due to the COVID-19 worldwide. That's the very short background, but in terms of the tax authority, we have a challenge that there is at least two challenges we face. One is about the income tax challenge, and the second one is VAT or GST challenge. For your information, in Indonesia, we use VAT regime. In income tax challenge, we are talking about the physical presence. It's needed to gain the right to tax through the permanent establishment. This is the conventional way of we taxing the international taxation. And in VAT, in case of Indonesia, we are talking about administration challenge for VAT collection. So let me explain a little bit about the development, the recent development starting from the VAT issue. Basically, OECD proposed some proposal and in the VAT, but in general, they propose to simplify the registration and compliance regime as the solution to collect the VAT. So there's some issue that I would like to highlight, that government appoint the foreign suppliers to collect and report the VAT, and VAT registration, collection, and reporting should be done online, so as simple as possible. And in 2018, based on my understanding, that most of OECD countries apply this simplified register and collection regime. And in case of Southeast Asia, especially in 2020, Singapore and Malaysia imposed this GST on digital services, and followed by us, by Indonesia. And while Vietnam and Thailand are currently proposing such measures, and the Philippines has also shown interest in amending its tax rules. My apologies, I need to make a disclaimer that we designed this paper like 2 or 3 months ago, the last time, last update like 2 months ago. So I know that the movement of this issue is very fast. So I hope I can still catch up the very current issue. And if not, then we need I need input from you. And another issue that I would like to talk about, the recent global development on the work toward global consensus. I believe the previous speaker also already talked about this, but in 2019, OECD released 2 pillars to tax the digital economy. The pillar 1 is a new nexus and profit allocation rules, or it's called unified approach, and the pillar 2 is addressing risk of profit shifting by MSEs to low tax countries. And once the consensus is reached, it's not reached yet, any temporary measures that have been taken should be revoked. I would like to talk on pillar 1. Pillar 1, especially market countries have taxing right to income of foreign business when the business has no physical presence in country with some condition or certain condition. This is some condition that I write. Should be MSC or customer facing business, and then the MSC profit will allocate to the market countries if only exceed the specific profitable, and profit allocation for each country will be determined based on the key allocation. If you asking me what is the threshold of these 3, we are not still discussing. It's not decided. That's why once it's not, as I mentioned in the left side, it's not reached yet. So the countries still discuss about this threshold. And while waiting for the global consensus, some country has done, and some still in proposing some technique to to taxing this digital activity, digital economic activity, significant economic approach or ASP, and second one withholding tax and turnover tax. The significant ASP basically is they try to to taxing based on the significant economic presence. Some factor can be used, for example, by revenue of the company who make a business in that country within a certain threshold, and also by user-based factor, for example, active user of the certain website or certain e-commerce. But the challenge is this cannot apply for the tax treaty partner, because in tax treaty agreement, or we already define this issue. I mean the permanent substitute issue in the tax treaty. There is the challenge. The Another issue is another technique is withholding tax. So basically, they put the withholding tax in certain kind of digital related payment, yeah. And this is actually is like a new object of the tax. And this also the challenge also facing with the about the tax treaty, because in tax treaty we also already mentioned almost all of the kind of type of the tax. And turnover tax is basically taxing on the sales with certain amount of rate. I would like a little bit faster. And another one is the so the proposal from the OECD is collecting VAT as a priority with some note here, and no need only depend on the voluntary compliance. So it's about reputation ration, and tax authorities should cooperate by establishing information exchange and assistance and recovery, and need to regulate the penalty, and should not distract choice between foreign and local suppliers. Basically, should be equal. Okay, so I mentioned before that there is still have a discussion about the threshold, basically for the consensus, but there are some proposal that the global threshold most likely will be 750 million US dollar. I mean, the company who have this amount have turnover or more than this number, then we have to we can tax it, and then only profit that tax it routine profit that can be allocated to the countries. And if we follow this proposal, we try to find how many companies. In 2018 we found like about 5,600 companies with annual revenue more than 750 million euro a year globally, yeah. And but only 64% of them have a profit above 5% and of revenue, and only 40% of them have profit ratio more than 10%. So it's like a consideration of how much we will make a threshold. And okay, I will skip. Sorry, let me move to Indonesia. In Indonesia, we also have a very huge potential on digital economy. The internet user is like more than 175
Wawan, your connection, I think, a bit cut off. Try to bit, so we didn't hear your voice. Maybe you take over the prepare. I will tell him. Okay, sorry. Wawan, Dr. Wawan, could I will ask Hiroko to take over your PPT? Yes, and so maybe your internet connection a bit like, yeah. Dr. Wawan, are you there? I think he. Okay. Sorry, but just leave it there.
Can you hear me, Nela?
Nela, you are mute.
Yes, it's clear now, Wawan, and then leave to Hiroko to monitor to control the slide, you just mention which slide.
Okay,
And then
Nela, and
almost at the end your presentation, so give 1 minute.
yeah, okay. And then please let me turn off my video, yeah, to make it. Nela, okay?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I can
So
hear.
let me continue. In case of Indonesia, we have a digital tax as a part of emergency measure. We issued a new law in 2020, and one of the part of this law also mentioned about the digital tax measure, cover VAT collection on digital transaction, and also cover about significant economic approach. However, we know until today we have done only on the VAT collection on digital transaction, and we are still working on this significant economic approach regulation. Okay, next. So this the scope of the scope of the regulation. Scope of foreign suppliers is individual and or enterprises supply digital goods and services to Indonesia customer of online market delivering digital goods and services to Indonesian customer, and there is a threshold. The transaction in Indonesia exceeds about 41,000 US dollar a year or 3,420 US dollar a month, and or having more than 12,000 users annually or 1,000 users monthly. And scope of the digital goods and services is digital goods is intangible good in form of digital information, including software, multimedia, electronic data, and digital services, such as services sent via the internet or electronic network. And VAT for intangible access and services other than those subject of digital subject are subject to VAT by using the standard mechanism. And also government provide an online system and yeah, others infrastructure. So next. So I'm running out of the time, and my conclusion is that the current income tax principle does not give market countries to write the foreign enterprise without any physical presence with VAT, GST collection, face administration and enforce obstacle. So COVID-19 pandemic strengthened the urgent of need for the tax foreign digital business. And collecting revenue from the indirect tax side should be a priority for the market countries, and simplify foreign supply registration method is a favorable option. In the formula of global consensus, market countries should actively engage in the discussion to ensure the threshold, nexus, and profit allocation constitute as a fair share between resident and market countries. And unilateral measures should be taken temporarily and revoked immediately once the global consensus has been agreed and implemented. So there's income two pros, income tax and impose tax, turnover tax. So that's all, Nela. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Dr. Wawan. I think without further ado, I give the floor to Ibu Dwi to give her feedback to Wawan. The floor is yours, Ibu Dwi. You still mute when you unmute.
Sorry, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to giving me the chance to become a discussion for what already presented by Pak Wawan. I'm very proud. Actually, this is like Indonesia time for this event. So from what already I explained, but by Pak Wawan regarding the digitalization economy, especially in the term of the emerging market perspective. It is clear that I think it is also discussed from the very beginning that the tremendous impact of digitalization on the economic has created the opportunity and then also the challenge for the government or for the most jurisdiction. It's like two sides of coin. In one side, it is allow the government to or many government or many jurisdiction growth their economic, but on the other side, it has also a challenge because in this case, digitalization that I mentioned before has allowed the company to reach the customer in the market jurisdiction without having physical presence to be performed or to be situated in the country. It is also present clearly by Mr. Wawan. As I mentioned before, it is like a two side of coin. On one side, it is allowing the business to grow, but on the other side, it is make. It is also make the income of the world also arise. But it is also proof that on the other side, this income it is only enjoyed by a very small of countries, especially in particular developed countries where this digitalization is being invented. In this case, only a few countries has the right to tax, and the viewer, most of the countries become only a viewer. The biggest part of the world is become a viewer of the development of digital economy, especially in terms of the direct tax. As for in the indirect tax, also many countries now have their own unilateral measures, but it is also very depend on the domestic regulation of each countries. And it is also already mentioned by Pak Wawan, many countries has their own unilateral approach in terms of indirect taxes. Further in the paper also mentioned regarding the absence of the global consensus that which is have to actually reach in by the end of last year. But unfortunately, this global consensus is not yet being reached. And I'm personally actually we are really waiting for the global consensus to be achieved. As I mentioned before, also while waiting for this global consensus, many countries already approach their unilateral measures. Maybe it is now it's become very very Indonesia also one of the countries that being investigated by United States because of they thought that Indonesia also implement the unilateral approach measures regarding the digital economy. But actually, Indonesia is not yet implemented for the direct tax. In the last part of presentation, Pak Wan also mentioned regarding the situation of the COVID-19. Actually, in my personal opinion, also this COVID-19 situation, this pandemic situation, also giving the opportunity to this digital economic business growth. Since there are, many people's lockdown, they have to stay at home, they consume more to the digital goods and services. In fact, it is growth like by 60% the media consumption. In this case, in the unfortunate situation, but still there's a fortunate situation giving, the rise of the income for the digital economy. And I think it is also become the opportunity actually for the country to tax this kind of activity. But unfortunately, again, some of countries may not enjoy this kind of situation. To continue regarding the challenge in the taxing of the digital economy, I would like to reiterate actually, but it is also mentioned by Pak Wawan regarding the involvement of the many emerging countries in building the consensus-based solution as a part of the international collaboration. From my perspective, it is very important to maintain a common ground of the internal coherence of taxation policy, in this case, to enhance world welfare and economic development in the very fair share of the taxing right. the rational thinking behind, the policy rational thinking behind that thought is that actually the potential digital economic activity, it should be a design that leads the agreement to that may lead eventually to represent those common ground and the policy coherent amongst countries, amongst jurisdiction. I think it is also clearly discussed by Pascal yesterday that in the discussion, in order to achieve the global consensus, it is also influenced by the policy of the developed countries. Maybe that is why the global consensus is not yet being achieved, because there is so many interest in to be discussed, or the policy interest to be achieved, or what can I say? Maybe the policy interest to be discussed and then to be finalized in that discussion. So that's why maybe that is one of the reasons the global consensus is not achieved yet. I think it is really clearly mentioned by Pascal on the other day. So in that case, I would like also to reiterate that maybe the openness of the transparent of the digital service and the operation conducted by the MN is become a very crucial point actually. So in that case, we can have like a global consensus to the fair share of the taxing right. I would like to now to the last part of my comment of from Pak Wawan already mentioned regarding the recommendation. I do agree that it has to be international collaboration, and then also regarding the compliance. I think I would like to reiterate my concern also regarding the jurisdiction efforts to increase their tax administration capacity in order to reduce the administrative costs later on, if the global consensus is achieved, or even if the global consensus is not achieved by middle of this year. Many jurisdictions has to prepare in terms of the regulation, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the human resources. I think in order to make the administration cost is in the reasonable path. And then also not to mention regarding the compliance. I think in this case also jurisdiction have to be prepared for the holistic approach in preventing the disputes it may arise, or even to resolve the dispute if arise later on after the implementing. I think that is my comment for what already being presented extremely great by Pak Wawan, and then I return back the time to the moderator, Ms. Nela. Please, Ms. Nela, thank you.
Thank you, Bu Dwi. And I was about to ask many questions, but I saw there's a lot of Q&A here. But before we go to the floor and then address the question, I will give the floor to Wawan first to address Ibu Dwi feedback. Well, maybe you can do that in 1 or 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Bu Dwi, for the feedback, and I will take a note. Thank you very much, and then I will improve my paper based on your. I have no comment actually, Nela, from Bu Dwi. Thank you very much. Maybe next I would like to answer the question. Maybe Nela.
Okay. Here there's a question from Miss Lucy Kairani Putri. Mr. Wawan, I would like to ask, what is the middle way that the government choose to take as a solution? Because in one side, the government want to encourage the improvement and development of micro domestic business using e-commerce, but also in the other side, very eager for being able to tax this digital economy. She's from Coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs in Indonesia. Yeah. The floor first.
Okay. let me try to respond, and maybe Putri can help me later. Okay, thank you, Bu Lucy, for the question. So basically, we try to tax the digital activity, digital economy activity. The reason is for the equality, right? Because previously we taxing only the one who make non-digital activity, and there is no equal treatment because someone who did digital economy activity, we did not taxing them, and now we put equal treatment actually for the domestic company who do digital or non-digital. It is same threshold, which is 4.8 billion rupiah a year. Once you reach that threshold, then you have to collect the VAT. As long as you are under that threshold, you don't have to collect the VAT. And for the international, I mean, for non-Indonesian company who make business in Indonesia, as I mentioned in my presentation, is 600 million rupiah a year. Once your activity in Indonesia reach this 600 million rupiah a year, then you have to collect the VAT from your customer in Indonesia, a transaction only in Indonesia. So basically, even this policy is equal treatment for everyone. The one who make a business in online or offline or both combined. Previously, it's not equal, so it must become equal treatment to all of the business activity and business sector. I think that's my comment for Bu Lucy question.
Yes, and there's another comment in the chat box from Dr. Subramanian. Dr. Wawan read your suggestion of temporary unilateral measures. Could you please clarify the digital tax policy implication?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In my presentation, I said there is at least three kind of the type of temporary measure for this digital transaction that have been done by some countries, including Indonesia. One is a significant economic approach, SEP, and this one actually because in non-digital, or I can say conventional type of system, we know about the permanent establishment, right, or physical presence. But for this digital activity, we cannot take this physical. So then some countries propose to use the significant economic presence based on this the revenue of the activity in their respective country, and also based on the user-based factor. And the impact is, yeah, if we did this, then all activity that done in our country and meet certain threshold, then we have a right taxing them. So I think this is because I mentioned before that there's a potential, very huge potential of activity in digital economy. Then I believe that the tax revenue will be increased if they implement this, and also in the withholding tax and turnover tax, because the question is about the impact, right?
Yes. Okay. Mr. Dr. Subramanian, okay, you raise your hand. You want to ask question or feedback? Dr. Subramanian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nella. I just wanted to support Dr. Wawan's views in this regard. We in India also face exactly the same situation on taking these unilateral measures. And there are, although there are a lot of objection in the international community in this regard. Perhaps you are also aware of it, and I support your views on this matter.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Before we go to the next question, I want to comment something. Actually, the composition of the right to tax from country, that's intellectual property. So then we can see, like Ibu Dwi said that, on ECD in G20 countries, that's a big country, so there's benefit them. How about developing countries? I mean, the small countries, they actually market from the digitalization.
Yeah.
So yeah, but Dwi, you can answer that. But I want to add, I think ADB also plan to have that kind of like international taxation hub collaboration, kind of like hub for knowledge for the Asia and Pacific countries. So if countries in the under jurisdiction of ADB can raise their opinion as well. But if you have knowledge how small countries can have a benefit from this consensus, could you elaborate? Thank you.
Thank you, Bonella. I do really, I mean, it is a great a plan if we are in the Asia Pacific, maybe could have also a hub like you said, because as I mentioned before, it is very, maybe it's very benefit for us if we have like in the international collaboration. I mean, it's become, if it is, I mean, OECD is like related to very big country and developed country, maybe we should have like a kind of mixture here in the Asia Pacific between some countries already developed and then some countries emerging and the other country maybe less developed. I think it will be very giving the advantage for the most of the countries. Like I mentioned before, the international collaboration, maybe somehow it will give like the strength also in order to push the global consensus. The global consensus, it is regarding the fair share of the taxing right actually. So in that case, yeah. For the marketing jurisdiction, it is also give the important role actually in the development of the digital economy. So in this case, in my opinion, the marketing jurisdiction, and it is the biggest part of the world actually, they should have the strength, they should have like a voice in order to make or to push the global cooperation related to the common ground or to the coherence of the tax policy amongst jurisdiction among countries to be achieved later on. I think that will be my short answer, Bu Nela. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Dwi. I think we have another question from Anonymous. Have you considered imposing a certain kind of tax or fee on the digital platform itself, specifically airwave or frequencies? Either of can Wawan or Ibu Dwi? Wawan,
I think a policy is Pak Wawan role.
Okay, Pak Wawan. Wawan, the floor is yours.
Consider imposing the tax fees for digital platform itself. So far, we haven't put this as the object, my understanding, but I think this is a good idea on the frequency. Yeah. So you mean that if someone who have I'm not really understand the meaning of this airwaves and frequency. Mean like a radios or something like that, or
yeah, I think
yeah.
I think if he or she want to ask a clear answer, maybe they can email us and then we will give that to you. Okay.
Or Budwi,
you want to address something?
Any idea about these airwaves?
Yeah, I think airwave. Maybe it is. We have to conduct research also in this case, Pak Wawan, whether it is reliable to be taxed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the airwave. I think it is kind of new thought actually, and it is quite interesting. And I do hope that I mean Indonesia will have a research on that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. We did like run out of time. So thank you very much, Bu Dwi, Pak Wawan, and everyone that participate. Very fruitful discussion. Now we move to our next session. This will be Professor, let me see name. Professor Adrian Sawyer. He's a professor of taxation and previous research director from the University of Canterbury Business School. He holds an SJD from University of Virginia and MCom, BCom, and LLB degree from University of Canterbury. So he will talk.
Very much.
He will talk about how the journey of the revenue administration in Australia and New Zealand. And the discussion for this will be Dr. Wawan Juswanto. I don't have to introduce Wawan. But now I already introduced him before. So now I give the floor to Professor Sawyer. You have 10 minutes, and after that we will move to Wawan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nella. I'll just get my screen sharing up and underway. Okay, can everyone see that all right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk about the chapter that has been put together by Professor Jenny Granger and myself. So this is a joint effort, but I'll be doing the presentation on behalf of the two of us. And the chapter is looking at the journeys of both the Australian and New Zealand revenue administrations. So it's a little bit of an introduction. It's sort of come through, and I'm sure we all appreciate that the combination of digitization and technology has been having a considerable impact on supply chains. And often we think about the supply chains in relation to business, but this is also in relation to revenue authorities as well. And as I'll talk about a little bit later, COVID-19 has had quite a severe impact on supply chains. In the chapter itself, which is much more detailed than this brief presentation, we take a tax policy lens. So we're looking at the big picture rather than delving into individual detail. And we adopt institutional theory as the basis for which we look through. So we've got two revenue administrations, which are significant institutions that in themselves have quite a big impact on what happens in each country's tax system. We take a two-country comparative case study. So throughout the chapter, we look at how each country has dealt with certain issues, and then we draw some themes which are in many cases common between the two. The main question that we seek to answer is, how is digitalization shaping the role of revenue administrations, again, focusing on these two countries? And the paper works through and analyzes that, and then we offer some conclusions and policy implications. Okay, a little bit of an overview, and again, this is a very high-level summarized overview. So both jurisdictions started from what we call creaky foundations. So they had legacy systems in place that have had patchwork things added to them to try and keep up with developments. And at some point, these systems are just not going to be able to cope. And what has been a big challenge, obviously, is to keep pace with what the government requires, what the wider community requires, and businesses. And as those expectations are growing, the challenge has been how to keep up. So what both jurisdictions have done is move to new platforms, which essentially work on an automated operational process. So moving away from manual to automation. And the main catalyst for this change, on top of those needing to keep pace, is the fact that digitization of services has been encouraged from governments and elsewhere, and the fact that there's a lot more data available and it needs to be analyzed. So these two key things have been the catalyst for change. And through the process, things that became very clear as we looked into this is that you need to have a system with flexibility, that you need to actively involve your stakeholders in the engagement and collaboration, so you need to work closely with them. But you need to balance expectations, because often expectations may be beyond what you're actually capable at a given point in time to deliver. And at the same time, we're recognizing that tax doesn't exist in isolation. So there's this need to recognize interconnectedness between different parts of the government service, with the wider economy, and particularly with the digital ecosystems that surround it. So managing risks is very, very important. Okay, in terms of enhanced services, some of the things that have emerged is that the revenue administrations are becoming very frequently the one digital entry point for government services. So you start there and it expands beyond to other parts. It becomes an easy way to comply with automated interactions with individuals and businesses. So it becomes a lot less manual, said, focusing on automation. There's also the development of relatively seamless automated business reporting. So the information that businesses have can be taken out of their systems and taken through directly into the revenue administration. It also gives enhanced access for the agents of the taxpayers. And in many cases, as they do developments, they pre-test. So they choose a number of these agents to pre-test to see if things are working. And what this means is that the role of the players, the revenue authorities particularly, is often providing advice, because the information that they have, there's a lot of pre-filling where it's been collected. So more than just requesting data is actually about to provide advice. And alongside this is the rolling out of mobile apps. And this has been highly encouraged so that you can do it not just at a computer screen, but with your mobile phone from any device at any time, or another way of thinking it, 24/7. Okay, so that's sort of looking at it from the perspective of the revenue authorities, Australia and New Zealand, but thinking about it more globally, because we're seeing interconnectedness, and this theme's been coming through across the world. And so some of the key issues here that we see is that there needs to be further development of administrative capability. So one example is the Common Reporting Standard, as revenue administrations share information between themselves. And that's become a response to the underlying policy developments. Both Australia and New Zealand, so the Australian Tax Office and Inland Revenue, have played key roles in developing the OECD's BEPS response to digitalisation. So at the same time of dealing with domestic issues, they've been actively involved in the global sphere. Professor Craig Elliott, who we heard from earlier today, in the very good article that he referred to, talks about the fact that we have the 1920s compromise, which was developed by the League of Nations principally to reduce double taxation. Now we're looking at potentially developing what could be known as the 2020s compromise, which is principally with BEPS Action 1 on digitalisation and how to respond to those issues. And potentially this looks like it could be even a bigger challenge than what it took to get the 1920s compromise. Okay, sort of talked about this a little bit, but the issue of data sharing and data transparency. So we see this at two levels. First of all, within a country, there's a lot more information being shared between government departments. So you might see it between the revenue, the welfare, in some cases it might also be going to law enforcement. So that's one area where it's a little bit easier for a country to set its rules. But we're seeing the information being shared between jurisdictions around the world. And so this gives rise for concern. For example, privacy protection. How can you ensure that confidential information is going to remain confidential in some other jurisdiction? Because of course we can't legislate beyond our own jurisdiction. Confidentiality. Information has been provided confidentially to the revenue authority. Sometimes it's got commercial sensitivity. What happens now if that information is going within the government or around the world? And then there's the ethical concerns. If the data was provided for a particular use, how can we ensure that it doesn't get used for other uses for which it wasn't provided for? So these are very challenging issues that will take some time to maybe resolve. If we look at it from the perspective of taxpayers and tax agents, this is where potentially there are a number of concerns. Everything is moving to an online platform, but that isn't always suitable for taxpayers or their agents. Many agents just want to talk to a human being, and the time it can take to do that, you virtually have to give up, because the Revenue Authority wants it to be on an online engagement. We also have, from many taxpayers, they are digitally challenged, and even in developed countries like Australia and New Zealand, not everybody's got access to good broadband. Not everybody is competent in using a computer, particularly the elderly, the vulnerable, the people with disabilities. Yet the system's been developed assuming that these people can somehow interact on an online platform. And a particular example is, as we see more AI being used, AI is starting in some cases to make decisions rather than humans. And there was a case in Australia known as the robo-debt, where in fact it was admitted afterwards that the decisions made were actually potentially unlawful. So there's a great risk as we digitize things more, take away human checks and balances, that we could have some very undesirable outcomes. So I talked earlier that COVID-19's had an impact, and how prepared were the two countries, and what might be the new normal? Well, both the revenue administrations of the two countries were invaluable to how each has responded fiscally and beyond. So they're not just been dealing with revenues and money, but had in many cases, the first degree of contact. They've been very vital in providing an analysis of business and employment impact, so the government can assess, okay, where are the pressure points? Where do we need to provide support? Both of them have fortunately been able to show agility with highly digitized platforms. The question, which is, I think, interesting to think about, is that showing foresight or just good timing or good luck? What do we know about the long-lasting impact of COVID-19? Almost on a daily basis, we learn more about it, and potentially it looks as though its impact is going to be longer than initially thought. We see that the revenue authorities are a key data hub for governments. So will this be a one-stop shop for business? You only have to go to one place. We also see increasingly working with partner agencies. So the pressure's coming to make sure all systems are integrated, talk to each other, share information, and have the protections in place. That, again, is a large challenge. So to conclude and offer some policy recommendations, focusing on 6 key things that we pick out in our analysis. First of all, the design of the IT infrastructure is moving away from tax-specific to being integrated and networked. So that's across the board, parts of government, etc. And you have to plan for contingencies. You don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when the next pandemic is going to come along. We don't know when the next global financial crisis is going to occur. That they have an expanding role as a smart data hub for the whole of government. So the government's relying upon what has been collected by the revenue administration. There has to be a shift away from just consultation in the design to actually collaborating with stakeholders, because at the end of the day, if you want them to work through this platform, you need to be sure that it's something that's working for them to be able to meet their obligations, etc. You need to support people through the transition, particularly the vulnerable, but also you need to support other taxpayers, tax agents, etc. You need to manage the wider ecosystem risks, some of which may not become that noticeable right at the start. And you need to check that your administrative powers are both effective and sufficient. So you need to check, will they actually enable us to do what we need to do in this new environment? Do we need to redress them? Do we need to actually create new powers? Are they actually working? Okay, well, thank you very much. And I look forward after the discussion to any questions that people may have. Thank you, Nella.
Thank you, Professor Sawyer. I think now there's very impressive presentation. I have some ideas actually from your presentation. Now I think now we give to Wawan first for his feedback. Wawan, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Nela. Thank you very much, Professor Sawyer, for your clear and comprehensive presentation in the, such limited time. I would like to again highlight a little bit the presentation of the Professor Sawyer. The presentation covered the cases of Australia and New Zealand comprehensively. And if I may summarize the presentation, the Professor Sawyer delivered this some key points: the challenges of the digitalization, including the high expectation from stakeholder, increasing challenge to detect non-compliance, data protection, as well as unequal access to the digital services. And then the other key point is about the opportunities, including the enhanced service delivery and more critical role of the tax administration in building data hubs, which not only powerful in context of taxes, but also other purpose at the government level. It was also useful to support analysis in COVID-19 issue. However, there are some issues to be considered in the future, including the development
Wawan, you cut off again.
The development of jurisdiction.
Pak Wawan, can you repeat the last question? I mean, the last sentence that you give to Professor Sawyer. We can like lost.
Can you hear me now?
Now, yes, clear.
I can hear you now.
Sorry. Let me turn off my video. Sorry, let me turn off. Okay, so however, there are some issues to be considered in the future, I think, including the development of information technology, the development of data hub across the department and across the jurisdiction. And also, the professor mentioned about the importance of the digitally challenged people into account, as well as the necessary to access the possible risks, the possibility of legislation adoption to cope with the development. So the presentation has addressed the impact of digitalization in the context of taxation with Australia and New Zealand as a main case study, and touching on the global issue as well as the latest challenges related to COVID-19. However, I may add in our perspective, there are possible improvement. I don't know, this is my proposal maybe. One is the paper discuss wide range of topics, including the development of global context, especially interconnected. However, the topic is, I think we need to more clearly reflect the part of conclusion and in the conclusion and policy recommendation. And I suggest that you may want to mention policy recommendation for Australia, New Zealand, and also for the global community in this regard. And the analysis presented was very comprehensive, and it can be brushed up further with the data related to it. For example, the trends of tax compliance. And lastly, I have at least to respond or question maybe, Professor. How is the latest development of data hub by tax administration in Australia and New Zealand, and what has been the biggest challenge so far to do that? That's my comment and yeah, small question for you. And again, that was very insightful presentation, and thank you very much. That's all my comment, Bunela. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Wawan. Now I give the floor, before I open the floor to audience, I will give the floor to Professor Sawyer to address the feedback from Pak Wawan.
Thank you, Nala, and thank you, Warren, for those comments. Thank you for the fact that you found that the paper and the presentation was comprehensive and gave insights. Thank you for also the suggestions, as I understand it, to maybe look more about the implications, talk about in the conclusions of interconnectedness and implications for the global community. Certainly we can do something there. I think also you talked about looking at trends in tax compliance more up to date. I guess the issue there is how to work out what of that would actually be due to the digitization and what is the trends that happen normally. But I can certainly talk with my co-author Jenny about what that might be. In terms of the data hub in New Zealand, in terms of collecting data, I can't talk about Australia, and maybe Jenny might be able to comment on that, but the data hub is something that is, there's been data collected for quite some time to help things like benchmarking analysis, to be able to then provide information to other government departments. I guess the biggest part has happened is during COVID-19, and unfortunately in coping with the immediate issues, I don't think there's been a lot of time to actually think, what are we learning from this? What can we take away from it? More like, these are where the pressure points in the economy are. This is where more support is needed. And in some cases saying, well, actually, there may be taxpayers that have been claiming support that shouldn't be, because we're aware of other information. So I think this is something that needs to be done as the immediate dealing with it moves on, and we can start reflecting on it. But again, I appreciate those comments. I don't know, Jenny, if you've got anything if there at the moment to be able to talk about the data hub side from Australia.
Yes, Professor Jenny, yes.
Thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, in terms of the ability to provide data to government, that's actually been quite crucial in Australia. I think I mentioned it briefly in my presentation that they have automated the processes of businesses reporting employment data. And so one of the government's main initiatives, which was to support people whose employment was impacted through payments through their employers. They're able to do it that way, that the tax office was able to then provide intelligence to government every time people got paid about whether there were less employees or more employees wasn't working. And it also actually had a wider, and this is, I think, really important, there are pluses and minuses in this, but it had a wider benefit to government. The Bureau of Statistics that normally surveys quite a large population of businesses to understand impacts and typically takes at least 6 to 8 weeks to analyse that data and give it to government, was literally able to do it within like a week, and it was all employers that were in this system. So, you know, millions instead of tens of thousands to analyse it. There are downsides, though, from a citizen point of view. How much of your data do you want being distributed, how widely across government? So I think Adrian and I have observed this and how they're developing it and where it's going. It's an incredibly powerful opportunity, but it also has, you know, we need to be thoughtful about the impacts on citizens. Thank you, Dr. Nella. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Professor Jenny. Yes, please leave a question on the Q&A or raise your hand. And but before that, you know, I read your paper instead of presentation today, and I can share my thinking to you. You know, when you Australia established that my government, I was there, and I was at the time just finished my term in anti-money laundering. You know, anti-money laundering is about exchange of information, and then I just was I was amazed with the how integrated the data that Australia have for their tax tax database. So and then you have this concept of voluntary compliance, and then everyone will report their own tax. So and then I try to mirroring that, how if developing countries implement that, and I found out actually there's a lot of weakness. But I think from your paper, we can have some takeaways, I think, for developing countries. To be able to implement what Australia and New Zealand have done. To build the database, especially in this COVID-19 situation, and that push people to use digital. So, could you, if you is possible, and you may answer it right now, or maybe you can add in your paper. In developing countries, there's a lot of like shadow economy, informal economy that's very difficult to capture by the data, and especially in this COVID-19, actually, it's not only tax revenue, it's also how the government distribute their social security. They don't really know who's the one that doing business because there's informal economy, and how you encourage people to use, be in the system. And then, some countries, but I think India, Indonesia, especially China, I think we already have that kind of like integrated ID database, but many countries, maybe their database their ID is not connected each other. So that's difficult to capture who's doing the business. So, and then this is the one that I also admire, that in developing countries, there's a very poor trust among institutions for exchange of information. And then how, if you can elaborate how actually that kind of coordination. I remember that Australia, they can check to Centerlink, they can check, to many institutions that, these people that they have overpaid for Centerlink, and then they have to return the tax. So this kind of coordination is just like automatically. But in developing countries, this it's kind of like a dream to have that. So maybe you can give some of your thoughts how to maybe developing countries learn from what you have. Thank you. Professor Sawyer, and then Professor Jenny, if you want to add.
Yep, thank you, Nella. Those are very useful comments. Just one thing I would say, which I guess is in Australia and New Zealand has been very important overall, is how much trust the people have in the government and the revenue authorities, and the fact that the countries are relatively free of corruption and things. So that has, I think, made people generally comfortable with what happens. But we might come to pressure points where people are saying, this is just going too far. I'm now concerned that my information is going elsewhere. So there is a risk that there might be a reduction in that trust. And if that starts eroding, then what's been built up over many years, we could see a backward move. So there are risks there. And I guess, and that's one of the questions we ask is the fact that all this is working so well, was it well planned or was it good luck? And I think there's a mixture of both. But anyway, Jenny might have some other comments.
Thank you, and apologies, apparently I had managed to obscure my face, so I hope, here I am. Look, I completely agree with what Adrian is saying, and I think in terms of learning about how they've done it, a number of countries now have these quite sophisticated analytical capabilities to develop the data that actually most tax administrations get. I guess that's the point, is that data will be there. And I think tomorrow we will hear from Japan about their steps they're taking to bring that data that you've got together. It's then the ability, of course, to then capture and connect other data to it. Trust is enormously important, but also the other thing I would say is benefit. The costs can be high, both the UK and Australia, and I think from talking to Adrian, New Zealand, the costs for business to go down this track because it requires digitization, although some of those costs with mobile technology and also platforms providing cheaper services might change that equation even in the developing world. But the costs are high, and if it doesn't prove a benefit also to your community, not only have they got to trust the data collection process and how that's used responsibly and how you can challenge if you think it's being abused, because as Adrian mentioned, we've just had a really sobering example of that going very wrong in Australia on what was called robo-debt, which was in the social welfare system, but you know the impacts of these things can be for everywhere. But the other thing's benefit, and that's why again I'll go back to this example of how, and yes, timing was sweet for Australia, probably partially luck and partially good management, because there's been a direction to digital for decades in Australia that, you know, that's been where they are. But very briefly, what happened is that whole reporting of data about employments, payments and collection of the tax associated, that system was reversed in COVID, and it was used to make supporting payments through employers for employees whose hours and income were reduced drastically because businesses were affected by it. So immediately employers were able to retain their staff with a supplementary payment from government. It wasn't as high as their wages, but it was something. So again, there was a benefit that came along from that system, not just the efficiency businesses get from going digital, but a system that, and again, this is probably, if you could ever describe anything with COVID as being good luck. Timing was good luck that it was used in this way, but the point is, it's now been seen as a two-way system. And I think there's a really big lesson there for policymakers and anyone involved in administration to think about how there's a shared benefit for your community out of it. And Dr. Nella, I know you asked about the shadow economy. That's another whole chapter. I won't do it now. I know you don't have time, but I think I said yesterday, there are things that you definitely can get on top of with digitizing around the current shadow economy, but the creativity of people who use it is that they start to exploit some of the weaknesses in operating in the digital world. So, which means the skills and tools that you have as administration have to keep up with the new ways that people will try and do that. In the same way with aggressive tax planning, you know, the experts in that dream up new ways. So we should never think that's going to be a finished challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Jenny. It's very comprehensive answer. Is there any, actually we ran out of time a little bit. Is there any question? Maybe if there's a question from the floor, I can give like one round and then we move to the next session. If not, okay, so we conclude this session. Thank you very much, Professor Sawyer, Professor Jenny, and then Dr. Wawan. Thank you very much. Now,
thank you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome.
Thank you, Nella. Thank you, Wawan.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Yeah, but please keep in touch. Please keep in this. So your feedback still needed. So and then now we're going to Mr. Pradam Kumar Srestra from Nepal to deliver his country presentation about country perspective, how far Nepal have in digital economy, and then Mr. Padam Kumar is a director of Inland Revenue Department in Nepal. I think without further ado, I give to him the floor. Yeah. Mr. Okay. If you can do slideshow, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, now it's clear.
I continue. First of all, thank you for ADBI team to participate in this program. It is the great pleasure, and thank you from the Minister of Finance and Inland Revenue Department on behalf of the Government of Nepal. In Nepal, tax administration has been implemented by Inland Revenue Department, that is under Minister of Finance. I will get short presentation of Nepal taxation system. That's called Inland Revenue Department. I will call IRD. IRD drafts the tax policies and laws, implements laws and policies related to value-added tax, income tax, excise, and other tax. And IRD has been working to expand the scope of taxes, implement necessary procedure and programs to increase the voluntary tax compliance, voluntary tax compliance of taxpayer. Yes. And monitor and evaluate the compliance of the tax laws and execute tax laws based on the tax risks. And IRD also implementing programs and work plans to manage the internal revenue, providing taxpayer services by using information and technology, issuing permanent account number, that is PAN, our identity number, and identifying all taxpayer and operating self-assessment system, testing and researching limited taxpayer, reducing direct contact and between taxpayer and tax administration through the information technology. IRD has been implementing strategies and programs such as increasing tax participation of taxpayer, reducing tax compliance cost, and bringing the informal economy under the tax net. And functional working procedure have been adapted in the operation process of the department and its subsidiaries subordinate offices. And the role of IRD is crucial in mobilizing the tax revenue through internal revenue resources. About half of the total revenue of the government of Nepal is collected from this department. And under the IRD, there are the 84 operational level offices, that is called one large taxpayer office, one medium level taxpayer office, and 43 inland revenue offices, and 39 taxpayer service offices, and overall staff about 1,700 working there. And composition of the tax collection is the 2018 and 19 tax revenue is 729 billion, and 2019 and 20 tax revenue is collection 700 billion. This is the composition of the tax custom, VAT, excise, income tax, and other tax. That is the composition. And 33% is the VAT collection. It's the major part of the collection is VAT. And also now on 2019-20, also 33% of collection of VAT. That is the huge part of the revenue. And also the tax revenue collection by the Inland Revenue Department that in 1920, this is the 384 billion, and 89-19 is 384. It is nearly about the collection of the 1920. The total collection is the 384, and that is the and the composition of the tax revenue. It is the major part of the income tax, that is called 57%, and VAT 25%, and excise 17%. And it is the revenue collection. Revenue collection by the office categorized. LTO means large tax office is collection 48%. Then medium level taxpayer office collect 4%, and other than MLTO or LTO, it 48%. And GDP tax to GDP ratio is the middle, total revenue is 21%, 15 and 16. And then now 2019 and 20 is 21.08%. And tax to total revenue to this the revenue to GDP. Now tax revenue to GDP is 2015-16 18.69, and now 2019-20 that's 18.59. This is the moderate level of tax to GDP ratio. And now we are going to income tax heading. There are 4 heading we are taxing in now: income from employment, income from business, income from investment, and income from windfall gain. It's the income tax revenue heading. And also where VAT chargeable in transaction, that is the goods and services, and there are VAT on goods and services supplied within the Nepal, and on goods and services imported to the Nepal, and on goods and services exported outside of Nepal. That is zero rated tax, and VAT is 13% now. And Inland Revenue Department is the tax system operation launching. Tax laws are designed based on self-assurance tax system, integrated tax administration, and IRD focuses on enhancing voluntary compliance of taxpayer. Tax officers strive for providing high quality service to the taxpayer, a risk-based enforcement law, and ICT-based operating system. And now we are going to e-commerce model. And Nepal is going to moving to the e-governance and digital taxation, digital Nepal framework. Now we're going to e-commerce taxation, where the model is the B2B model. This is the business model. This is the B2B model. Alibaba, India Mart is like this, and B2C model is the model of the OECD model. This clear under this one, and this is the model. This is the OECD model. Now we are completing the e-commerce online marketplace, order and supply of the goods and services. This is the principal and agent based, and subscription web services, and online advertising, This e-commerce include e-commerce operators, sellers, purchase. This kind of e-commerce business is going to operate in Nepal. And Income Tax Act in which the concept of natural person and e-commerce guideline for the Income Tax Act in which the concept of natural persons and the person that is the business entity only. For tax purpose, only business entities digitalization are under the tax jurisdiction. There is no provision for natural person as an individual to have an business transaction and fall under the tax net. Digital transaction create new era that every individual can participate in a digital transaction, but it is difficult to administer every person saying it is a business. For what? We need to amend the Income Tax Act to cover the such transaction under tax net in easier way. Now Nepal is going to the e-commerce law, where we are drafting in by the Minister of Industry and Commerce, and also it's going to the e-commerce policy and digital e-commerce policy, and now we're going to the revised tax act, and also the guideline for the drafting for the guideline e-commerce taxation for the more easier to tax. And to cover this issue, now we are drafting the e-commerce guideline for the taxation, and Central Bank has developed a payment system for online financial services and the advertisement of Google and Facebook, etc. Now Central Bank is also drafting the guideline of foreign exchange facilities for individual. And Minister of Industry, that's called the tax in e-commerce law. And taxation on transaction of social network like Google, Facebook, you can this issue and challenges for taxes in digital in Nepal. And difficult to establish businesses having net virtual transaction without any physical evidence. Importance of electronic payment to bring the digital transaction under tax net, placing order by e-system, but cash payment on delivery on B2C. Digital transaction occur both within the country and outside the country, but recording and tracing the such transaction are very difficult. In most of the payment of international transactions, that there is a high risk of illegal payment through illegal channel, so-called hundi, and identifying the offshore virtual transaction, mainly the business buying and selling of MNEs, and fair share of profit and taxation right of the source country in the case of international digital transaction, especially on software sales as the supplier are not located in the tax jurisdiction, and taxing right of the source country. Taxing right of source country under the double taxation avoidance agreement treaties. This also affect the double taxation treaty. And our expectation this is program will know and understand the different form and moderate of the virtual transaction, will gain knowledge of tax behavior of different countries on digital transaction, will know the form of the mechanism of recording the digital transaction and establishing the taxing right of the source country, will be clear about new method of taxation on digital transaction instead of establishing the traditional form establishment, will understand the taxing right of the countries under the accepted bilateral and multilateral tax treaties. This is our expectation from this program. Now we're going to this e-commerce side. We are just in the introduced by Indian Department e-filing system, e-registration system, and e-payment system, and e-service provided by the tax office by e-service to the taxpayer. And also the central to connect digital e-commerce, we just elaborate the central billing monitoring system from the taxpayer. This online billing system will connect to the IRD. And biometric registration system, we are just introduced the biometric registration system. And electronic payment, we have promoted this electronic payment. And who paid by that electronic payment, these are the refund system by 10% of the payment of that. We're introducing now this kind of policy. And COVID-19 effect in the Nepal also. And there is the emerging issue the e-commerce. And thus the e-commerce has been increased by the people, this type of business, and that we have to tracking this kind of business by taxation. And first of all, we have to registration to the e-commerce business and taxation to the e-commerce. These are we are going to the two side of the development of the e-commerce taxation. One is the registration part of the e-commerce business, and another is the taxation of the e-commerce business. This is the short presentation of my country in Nepal. Thank you for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Padam Kumar. So I would like to ask everyone, I mean, if there's a question, and then you can raise your hand or put in the Q&A. But before that, I see that actually, Mr. Kumar, I see that how your expectation to know about how, you know, for the global collaboration, how, you know, how to tax without permanent establishment. That's actually very new knowledge, and then I think very beneficial for developing countries. I want to ask you, you said that's illegal payment that's through hundi, that you guys, you said it's look like that you cannot trace the payment, and then cannot apply tax on that. And is that a money remittance company? Is there they register somewhere in the institution in Nepal? Thank you. Mr. Kumar, if you can. Yeah.
We have anti-money laundering investigation department. These are the finding of this kind of payment, and this file that this is the finding and investigation this kind of payment by the anti-money laundering department, and also revenue investigation department. This kind of payment is investigated by this. There are two type of department. This investigate this kind of payment.
Yeah, I when I was in Indonesia, we also have that kind of a payment that cannot be detected sometimes. But then we ask them to register legally, and then through them, then we can have a collaboration, and then we can kind of like follow what the transaction. I mean, I know we from developing countries, there's a long way to go, but I think that if that's registered, there's a way to tax them, and there's a way to follow the transaction. So, you know, the tax office always have a hand everywhere. Yes. Is there any feedback or question from the audience, from the floor? So, okay. So I think if there's no question, thank you very much, Mr. Padam Kumar Srestra from Nepal. I appreciate, and then actually your presentation give a good description to us what happened in developing Asian countries. I think there's also good feedback for us, and then we can, if there's ADB people tomorrow, Bruno Carrasco will present about what ADB doing to improve the taxation in the ASEAN countries. So I think that's a good way, and for Nepal and many developing countries to gain benefit from that, to get knowledge from that. So please join, I ask our audience to please join me to thank you to all the speakers in the session 4 and the discussion on session 4. With that, I conclude this session, and we will go to closing. And I saw in the agenda my name for the closing. So Thank you very much, everyone, for the participation today, and then for your patience and for the fruitful discussion, the input that you give to us today. Let me remind you, tomorrow we will start in the same time again at 11 p.m., 11 a.m. Japan time, and we will have 4 papers, and then we have a keynote address from our tax expert, Chief Thematic in ADB, and he will explain what ADB can do to improve the taxation in Asia and Pacific. So, and we also have open Q&A session for that. So if you want to ask question, I think I think the country representative from Afghanistan yesterday, or from you, like from Nepal, asking what ADB can do, you can directly ask Bruno Carrasco tomorrow, because he's in charge on that, and he really know what the question. So thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. in Japan time. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nella.
Thank you, Didi Kim.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. I didn't know that you're there. If I know that I asked you to do closing. Hey, don't forget tomorrow
Thank you. See you
doing
tomorrow morning, Nella.
Hey, thank you,
Yeah.
Budwi. Thank you. Tomorrow
Yes.
you're doing the opening, right, Didi Kim?
Sure, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
I
you,
will be in
Mr.
the
Ramanian.
morning session.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Budwi,
bye-bye.
don't forget you do presentation tomorrow, Budwi. Yeah.
Yes, will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Padam Kumar too.
Love you, Tulip. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for all.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Kosugi-san. Tomorrow you're gonna do the presentation. Tomorrow you will give feedback to Ibu Dwi, and then you do the presentation, and Jenny Granger, Professor Jenny will give you feedback. You still mute. You still mute.
Oh, yes. Okay, I see. I understand. So I prepare for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
looking forward to hear from you.
uh-huh.
Yeah, I like to have people that expert in this area, like you, Ibu Tuti, and some people that know what happened in the global world, because we have many countries in Asia that actually they don't have any idea how to develop their taxation, and especially in the digital one, and how to have the right to tax. And so your input, Ibu Dwit input, so that's very beneficial for them.
Already, yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, so I'm a tax official, so that's why. So I'm not from academic side. So, so I just introduce implementation. So and so I cannot say about the policy matter because it's a Ministry of Finance matter. So
Okay.
also how much I can contribute to this this seminar. So.
That's okay. So in here we have a mix. So we have academia, so they can like explain, how to use artificial intelligence, blockchain. That's from academia side. But you also have policymaker side, and then this is CBT project, so it's not research project. So we expect that very, easily understand for government official policy makers the recommendation and what countries doing. So that's a good learning process for them.
Yes, it's very good opportunity for me to learn.
Yeah. I mean, besides you share your knowledge to other people, you also learn from that. You teach people, you share your knowledge, you also learn from that. They give you question, and then and then have some idea, and you develop that. So there's also a lot of benefit to individually to the person.
Okay. So
yes.
I'll do my best. So I'll prepare for tomorrow. So
yeah, see you tomorrow, Kosugi-san.
So, I also have a meeting from 3 o'clock, so that's why. So
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Padam Kumar. Thank you, Mr. Nuri, if you behind that. Okay, bye.